I'm outside naked. So who cares? I'm like,
They're literally not going to let him reno his house. Like, they're not going to let him have gas to his house because it's going to disturb the freaking soil.
and
Bono showed up for a concert.
like,
Sounds like a war zone to me.
oh yeah,
This is flying overhead. And they're dodging a tree, cranking it out.
here we go.
Aha!
Wee. So, do you ever draw a line in the sand where you're like, I'm not turning the heat on past whatever day?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yesterday, I'm like, what the fuck is that noise? And I'm like, that's the furnace kicking on. I'm like, what? Couldn't believe it. I'm like, I put it on from my Airbnb and I'm like, never shut it off. It was 15 degrees in the house. 15.
See, I'm not allowed to do that because I still got women in the house, man. Like, they bitch like crazy.
Yes. I'm like, I went out of the house yesterday morning. I'm like, that noticeable difference where it's colder in your house than out of your house. Like, I turned her out. I'm like, I'm going to have to, it's almost June, Bob. I'm going to have to light a fire. I can no line on the mountains. So now what everybody here is doing, they're freaking out because you know what's going to happen. We have I think the number they're giving us is 150% above normal snowpack. I'm like, ooh.
Oh.
And when summer comes, it's going to be gone.
Yeah.
They're worried about the valley flooding away. This is some crazy shit that's going to happen here where I live. Last year we had fire. The world's going to burn. This year it's like,
The world's going to flood.
please don't let it happen fast, because if it slows like they're projecting, but I'm like, that ditch I was working in the other day where that guy ran that water line.
Yeah. Underneath a fucking natural spring, right? Is that what you were saying?
Yep.
Totally illegal these days. Or probably legal back then.
Back in the day, in the 70s, so the guy, I ran the math calculation. If he's got a bleed line for what I'm looking at from a volume pressure drop on a 1-inch line, blah, blah, 200 million gallons of water. That's 800 million liters. And I'm like, ooh, that's a... So here's the thing. I cut that off. We're going to fuck everybody in the trailer park because their lines are going to freeze this winter. Because the whole time, me and Rael, we've worked there for years. I've worked there for 2 decades. And I'm like, the trailer park never freezes. And the lines are like it gets cold here for long enough that shit should freeze. And I'm like, and the water is just, and the guy's like, oh, the pressure's always been this. And I'm like, is this it? The guy's like, yeah, this is, the old owner of the house was called and she's like, the day my dad put that line in, that's all we got. And I'm like, 40 years. And he was right in doing it. But we look at it today as a waste of water. And back in the day, that's what everybody would have done.
Yeah.
Do you tell people that you're going under a fish-bearing stream right now?
No.
Through 2 different districts. And then I got my code book out. I'm like, it goes off the chart. There's no number for what you can put in there other than you can't do it.
We're just quoting out, or actually we're doing the reno job for a guy that lives right by the river. And it's kind of on the floodplain. And the house has been vacant for like 5 years. So ACO Gas wants to run a new line.
Yep.
And so that'll be directional drilled. But before they do that, they have to test for antiquities.
Yes.
And so it's next to the river on a massive floodplain. And he said they've owned it for like 3 years and they've collected arrowheads and all sorts of stuff that's just on the surface.
Gets better. My dinosaur bone, you're like, this doesn't look like a skull we've seen. Bob, that's a tooth.
So they're literally not going to let him reno his house. Like, they're not going to let him have gas to his house because it's going to disturb the freaking soil.
And like this guy, this place that we're working on, here's the funniest part of some of this stuff. So Cody Ross, that was Olympics. So 2010, 12 years ago, had a guy working for me. We're pulling out one day, and this guy was old. Like, he had his license taken away. So we're at the stoplight and it goes green.
You have to do some bad shit to get your license taken.
Oh, well, so he's that old guy. Like he was fucking hanging on. 90 something he passed on. He was,
Okay.
I think he was 96 and he drove. Here's the best part. So Cody, my apprentice, he looks at me and goes, the light's green. What are you doing? I'm like, I saw him come out. He had a Ford Ranger quarter-ton truck, like a little tiny one. And he's this old guy behind the wheel. And I could see him come onto the highway. I'm like, he ain't stopping. You don't give a shit if the light is red or not. So I wait. And Cody's like, what are you doing? And he comes around the corner pretty much on two wheels, right? Turning. Shortly after that, he almost hit a few people and they took his license away.
Oh, his driver's license.
Oh, yeah, driver's license. Oh, no. No fucks were given. He kept driving. They took the truck away. Rubber tire backhoe. Then they took that away. He's on a tractor going into town. The guy was... So in my one bathroom, I've made all these funky lights. There's a couple valves from that Underhill trailer park, and that was his name, George Underhill. And that line he put in back in the day, he was right. There was a headworks, it was gravity, it didn't cost any money. They didn't treat the water. In the early 90s, they drilled a well. That's why I'm giggling, because I'm like, you know, you're working away. You're not really working super fast.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you make a couple phone calls. And I giggle because I'm like, we're dumping chlorinated water into the river where the fish are. I'm just, it gets better, Bob. Buy a fuck right next door to a fish hatchery.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, yeah. Under 2 minutes, and we're feeding water from the Pemberton Valley District over to through another one. That's why I'm like, okay, it's 4 o'clock. No fucking way I'm getting a hold of anybody. I make my phone calls and I'm like, you're not going to believe this shit. I'm like, and I've made in my career, I swear to Christ, the inspectors I talk to, they're like, never even heard of this before. And like, well, check the video out. You're not like,
there it is.
Oh, and it's like some inspectors, farmers and miners, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You know,
farmers
and
can fix anything.
When they come in with a sledgehammer and they're like, you have to run a 4-inch water main to 3 toilets. And I'm looking at a house that's ran. Now, to be fair, it worked. If you shut off whatever that break is, the guy would probably have normal water pressure. The code book that says it won't work will. And that's one I'm seeing with Rael. Some of the corrections in the code, they make an addendum. So then we get it in the field, and I'm like, you know, Rael's like, he runs a 2-inch line. I'm like, what the? Oh, yeah. Sorry. My brain goes to the 90s from the 92 code, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's a hard one to break for me. Frost penetrations and shit. We run a 4-inch vent line through the roof.
Yeah.
Because you have to go 3-inch VTR, and where it penetrates, you have to go 4-inch. I'm like, for
Did
me,
you guys just change that?
Hey?
Is that new for you guys?
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Yeah. We've had that forever.
Well, the inspectors let you get away with 2-inch here, because 1.5 inches will more than enough vent the house. So all the venting they wanted, it says in the code book here, it was legitimate. And they told you straight up, you know, it says 1 inch. You have to go 1 inch larger. So 1.5 inch vent, you could calculate the venting out. It would do a whole house, no problem. So they said, it lets you get away with 2-inch here. Go up one pipe size. Because they're like 1/2 inch, but we'll let let everybody cheat here. So my whole career, it was always 1.5 inches in through the cold zones, upsize it, and then penetration was 1 inch larger than we did 2-inch. Never ever had a problem, right? So now, new code regulation that they adopted, 3-inch VTR required on every building. So the warehouse we piped, we had to have one single VTR dedicated line, nothing else ties into it. Label it.
Really?
Yeah.
Dedicated.
Yep, straight from the ground, all the way from groundwork straight up. And I'm like, ooh, where do you guys? So we had to line the sewer up where it intersected under a wall that you could run the 3-inch VTR, and then through the roof, right to 4. I'm like, that's some crazy shit. And
why? What's the reasoning for that?
Frost closure. 3-inch VTR. So here's why the 3-inch VTR came back in. And it's comical because they're doing it right now at my house. So I see the hydrojetter. They get the guy to come by every year. Hydrojet, the whole, everything. So because this 3-inch VTR is not on my house, when they hammer that vacuum truck, I've got to clean out. If I know they're coming, which sometimes I do, I'll pop the clean out cap off to let me have a 4-inch vent right at the street. Otherwise, they draw so much vacuum through that hose system when they hydrojet at the same time and vacuum.
Really? Suck it dry.
Sucks speed traps out of the house and everybody's house. And people are complaining, I smell shit. And it's like, they've been announcing this. Who reads their shit like that from the town? They're jetting. Make sure you run water. Nobody. All the shock and awe on the community forum site here is, smells like shit in my house. What's going on? Should we leave the premises? And it's comical. Nobody, right? Everybody a bitch about it, but nobody will understand or read.
Nobody will read. Oh.
That's for hydrojetting relief on the venting.
Wow. Well, that must be. Is that BC wide or is that just your region?
Oh, BC wide. And so it's funny because the house I just did up in Lillooet, next district up, the builder guy came in. This is a pretty funny story. We can do it live. If you're going to you get a good giggle out of this shit because I'm like, so I go up and do this job up north. And I got told from a buddy of mine that I went to kindergarten with. I was friends with this guy's brother. And my mom were best friends. So I go up north and he tells me when I'm going up, he's like, this place is a coliseum. It's huge. And I'm like, okay, yeah, no problem. Yeah. So get the lay of the land. I got to go get a business license for working in the town. Then I've got all my information, my TQ and all that. So I'm pulling the business license and the inspector's in the other room and I hear this voice come out and I'm with the clerk filling the bullshit out, paperwork. And I hear this, Turbo. I look over, there's the inspector that I've known for like 3 fucking decades. He's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm doing some coliseum up the hill. And he's like, oh, Bob's place. And he starts going off about it. And I'm like, yeah, Bob's place. So anyway, everybody knows. He's like, you're doing it. And I'm like, yes. He's like, thank Jesus. I'm like, Sunday, church day. He's like, oh, thank God. And I'm like, he starts coming up with this kind of shit. And I'm like, because he knows the work. He knows what you do, right? He knows he's going to test you. If you screw up, you see it. Like, we made a couple of mistakes. I'm like, I was drilling holes out and me and Rael were overlapping. He was doing drainage. I was doing water. So I kissed one of his drain lines because normally I drill the whole house out and I'm by myself. Well, he was running shit because it was get it done. We did the guy that quoted was 3 weeks. So when I met the owner, he told him to go fuck himself. So I got told this guy's he's in a panic. He's losing his drywaller. He's losing his all the dominoes that fall when you're one of the trade guys, one of the major fuckers. So this guy's like, shove it up your ass. I'm not doing your work. So this guy on a Tuesday wants to hang from a rafter. I get the story from my buddy JR, the car race guy that I went up and saw. I get all the story and I'm like, oh man. I'm like, all right, on Tuesday I decide I'll drive up there. So I drive up, meet the guy, and I'm like, Coliseum, and another friend of mine said same thing. Guy's building this egotistical palace overlooking the community. And I'm like, whoa, okay. You know where I work, right? Have you seen some of the fucking houses I work in, Bob? Right? So that Tuesday, I'm leaving a 19,000 square foot build with 2 cranes on it. Okay, so I'm thinking Coliseum, place is huge. So I get there, drive around. It's a little weird to get to the spot, drive down into it. Nobody, there's people working. So I look and I'm like, okay, not a bad house. I'm looking around. I do the lay of the land. So the dude comes in with the builder guy that supplies all the material and stuff. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, is this the nanny's house or where is the house getting built? And the guy's like, and I'm like, no, is it over? Like, how's it getting built? Is there going to be an infinity pool to block it away? Or right. And these guys are looking at me and they're laughing right until they realized I wasn't kidding. And I'm like, I was told, biggest house you've ever seen. And I'm like, now maybe clearly you guys, I'm like, there's a 56,000 square footer. That's bigger than most hotels. That's for one family. And I'm not talking 57 people. It's not the baker coming in. This is for like one guy. Who 56,000? I'm like, come on. And it was cute. When I asked the guy if it was the nanny's quarters, and the guy, once they realized I was serious, he is never gonna live this down. Ever. Because his buddy was giggling away, and I'm just like, well, this is some funny shit. Once they realized I wasn't kidding.
Yeah. How big's the house?
2,600 square feet.
Oh my
It
gosh.
was a nice house, but Coliseum, like when you, and the problem is you don't go into something like that, with a preconception, but these guys, the way they said it,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's the biggest place you've ever seen. I'm like, holy shit, in Lillooet? Maybe like a billionaire's moved up there and that's like that much land creep is going on. And no, it was cute. But the inspectors, it was funny. So to go up there, the two plumbers here and the one guy that's the good guy should have stayed with his journeyman for about another 5 years. I'm like, whoa. He puts in frost-free hose bibs. This was the best one. He goes on a job and fails it for this other guy that he's working with. So they're trying to get me to work farther up north. And I'm like, yeah, I like it because there's firewood, but it's a savage drive coming down. Those switchbacks where you're like,
Yeah.
driving that it's no fun. So I'm looking at either buying a place up there, renting a place, something, because I'm like, I like it up there. It's dry, different climate, definitely a shift of pace from what's going on here because it's busy.
Hey, you're in your busy season, right?
Yeah.
Tourist season.
Wow. And so what happens is our time frame needs to accelerate, and then they're probably Oilers fans. They fucking never seen a road that curves in their fucking lives. And I'm like, you know how many pictures I have of the back of an tag doing 30 fucking kilometers an hour? And it's some guy that he either took a plane here because he's seeing the road that I don't like, and I'm a mountain driver. I'm like, I'm not white knuckled. I can go a pretty good clip, but these guys,
Yeah.
you can see them just like, and then the fucking signs, avalanche warnings, don't stop, and it's like, and in the summer it's beautiful, but and God forbid there's a fucking grizzly bear on the side of the road. They will park. They will park. I almost rear-ended a guy because I drive pretty quick. I drive the mountain road. The speed limit's 60. I can drive it at about $120 consistently. Like even with a fairly good load on, like you fly. You cut the corners, all that. Almost rear-ended a guy. Came around a corner. All the stuff was sliding forward in the truck. He was stopped in the middle of
the road,
watching a bear, like around a blind corner, and I'm like, oh, God. Because then you got a local like me. I'm aware and I know the season, but with COVID and the bullshit, it hasn't really kind of got back to it yet. So it's starting, and it's like, oh, that's right. And for me, I don't get excited. I don't get mad. You know what? I'd rather have people slow down and be alive than be pissed off. And I take a different approach. I back up, put some nice music on, because you know what? You're going to risk your life to get around them. It's no fun, and then just accept what it is. Imagine me going to Saskatchewan, the oohing and the awing and looking sideways at all the bare land. That being said, I'm like, I looked out, I'm like,
there's nothing. Everybody watching from Saskatchewan, there's nothing there. Nothing.
Nothing.
As soon as you leave Calgary, it's the same scenery till you hit Ontario.
Woo! You get into and then Brandon, Manitoba, I think the road takes a 45-degree change, and you just see cars. It's like one of those movies.
Right.
Oh, that's where the self-drive cars are going to come in. I hope I live long enough to use them, right? Just program the car once you get out of Calgary, and you're like, okay, take me to Northern Ontario, and I'll go to sleep. But prior to that,
do you think you could do that? Do you think you could do that?
Do you think you'd ever trust it enough? Okay,
No.
Here's a good one too.
No.
The shit that we do. So we're
Not a
working
chance.
on in town, and this guy, so he's got a firewood cutting permit. That's it. If you saw the shit we were doing, you'd be like, oh, I'm like, even for me, I said to Rael, God bless you. In your career, I don't give a shit who you work for. You are never going to see this kind of stuff, ever. Right? Like, Waterline, I'm like, I never even heard of it. I'm like, the shit that we're doing on this property, I'm like, the guy's got, you work with people that have money. This guy's putting a hammerhead dock. Like, the stuff is not cheap here either. Like, it's expensive shit that we're getting. His dock is a manned drone landing platform. He's going to go on a drone and it fucks off and you fly around with it. And I'm like, and he's got 2 of them.
I've seen some of those things. They're crazy.
2 of them. And he's going to, I'm like, well, here's the thing. So
I hear they have like a 200K range.
Apparently he can fly to Pemberton. And I'm like,
yeah.
I think there are fucking helicopters like hummingbirds flying around here with tourists And I'm like, what could possibly go wrong?
Can you imagine
Oh
seeing
yeah,
some dude like in his little drone plane flying to? You're like, dude, that's
that's the
there's gonna be
modern.
tragedy all over that.
Yeah. Oh man, there's some stuff coming. Hey, you wait. Woo! I know fuel's. What are we? 230. I think we're 230 a liter here. People are have to prioritize here. You can see the shit going on. We had a transit strike here, and I'm like, electric vehicles sure are looking good, aren't they? No. The government needs money for all the initiatives that ain't nobody been working. Well, guess what? They're getting their tax money back.
Yeah.
Like
No,
the government can afford. I laugh. What did we give the Ukraine? We gave them what, $44 billion. If
44 billion.
we have $44 billion to give away, right? You know what?
That's the problem.
My buddies that are on the Bitcoin and all the crypto bullshit and all this stuff, I'm like, you know what? The overvaluation of currency, I'm like, you're not wrong. If we've got enough money to just pen stroke a $44 billion commitment for a war that's got fuck all to do with us, but we're here to help you out. No, the fuck I'm not. I'm like, I don't support any of these initiatives. You guys want to kill your shit? You've been doing it for years. You know what? You used to be a part of Russia. They want you back. Shit happens.
Yeah.
Let's everybody fly in for some.
You know, it's so like it's literally like I don't like it makes my head hurt because you're just like so.
President's in a bunker, but you know what? Fuck, get down. He's there with Biden.
What the fuck? He went to Davos.
I know.
He was able to go to Davos, and don't forget, not Bon Jovi, Bono showed up for a concert. Sounds like a war zone to me.
Oh, yeah.
There's missiles flying overhead, and there's Joshua Tree cranking it out.
What a party. And everybody's there, right? So what I heard one today, I got a good giggle out of it. It's like Elon Musk wants to buy the FBI for $100 billion. And they aren't quite sure if they're going to release the funds yet, like they're going to do the transaction. And I'm like, boy, I tell you, the more you watch, the worse it gets. Like,
it's terrible. All that Ukraine thing is, in my mind, is nothing but money laundering.
Oh,
like
100%.
what? Why?
100%.
Why is Justin Trudeau and Christina Freeland and his girlfriend, I forget her name, over in Ukraine?
Twice.
Making sure that the money gets in the right accounts.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
I got to go to the bank first and make sure that my $8 billion ends up properly, and then I'll go shake some hands.
Yeah.
And give a little speech.
I'll put your nod in for the United Nations. Do you want the rubber stamp? Your amount of commitment to the We Charity Foundation will indicate where I put the rubber stamp on that page. Can you imagine the shit that goes on? You'd be like, what?
No.
It doesn't like that. I'm like, the fuck it doesn't. I ran for council.
Of course it does. You do it. I do it.
I ran for council in my town, Bob, right here.
Yeah.
I don't want to say a little shitty town, but a little town. Okay? A little town. Minuscule on a fly's ass. Nothing.
Yeah.
I got a call from a union just south of me offering me $10,000 to fund my campaign to ensure that I get in. And I'm like, what? So that is a campaign on a community of 1,500 people at the time.
Right.
That's it. 10 grand. I had to buy a couple 2x4s that I got off job sites. I do work for the printer for the Canucks, so I could get a, either fuck you Calgary, fuck you Oilers, Flames thing. I could do all of that. And print it up. I know it's a little salty. Bob's a little bit. He's a fan.
You guys didn't even make the playoffs, so don't even try.
Hey, I'm just rooting for the Oilers fans because I'm like, the Oilers had it. Every Canadian team had a good team back in the 80s and 90s. Obviously, the Oilers were fuck. Pavel Bure, watching some of the play, I'm like, it's been awesome. Vancouver, I think we had the cup in the building a few times where we're like, there it is. The players went up. Don't touch it.
Don't touch it.
Yeah, we left Luongo in a little too much. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. That was the downfall of the Canucks is when you signed that dude to like $10 million a year, and then
57 when he's done. Like when we release him, and I'm like, who signed?
Are you still paying him? Are you still paying him?
No, I think we got rid of him. We got rid of it, but it cost a bucket load of money.
Yeah.
It's funny. The top paid player in the NHL, I think, still to record is Chris Pronger, and he was born a
No.
couple years under me. He was 127, unless they beat it. He had that record for years, and of course, everybody from our town. So he came into the little small community that I grew up in, and once he made it, signed his big deal, we were like, holy, how much? You know, this is 20 years ago, right? Like 25, maybe 30, well, probably maybe 20, almost 30 years ago, 25 years ago. 100 and how many million? That was $1 billion back then. That was so much money. He came in, props to him. He refurbished every local, all of the local area communities, like all the outdoor rinks, because it gets so fucking cold there. He rebuilt everything, new equipment. I'm like, man, he went through it. It was brilliant. Zambonis for the ice surface. Like, what a little give to the community. Pretty cool.
But those guys do a good job. And you know what? On some level, I think they should. Like, what are you going to do with $120 million, dude?
You're going to kill your best friend in a race car is what you're going to do. Why? Because I'm like, I buy and do anything. Woo!
Right? Anything.
Yeah. I'm irresponsible, and I can buy anything, and I'm not going to get in trouble.
Right.
Wow. Look at the shit we get up to, and we're like pretty good and restrained.
It is true. Without revealing too many secrets, I've been very close to tens of millions of dollars that have gone sideways. And I am convinced that God in heaven is like, dude, don't give that dude money. If he has more money than he knows what to do with, he will fuck up his entire life.
I was working on some other shit. Did Bob think he was getting ahead?
Exactly.
Fuck him over a little bit. Let's give him a little. Wait a minute. She's pregnant again? Oh, yeah. Yes. Let's give him 3 more kids. You're like, oh. No. You're not kidding. You're like, holy shit.
No, I was doing a deal. I'll leave the details out. The night before we went out, and everything was good. It was a $12 million deal. The next day, they were transferring $12 million from their bank account to my bank account. Had a lovely dinner. Showed up the next day at the lawyers, and they said, you know what? We've changed our mind. Fuck you. And these are the reasons, because a couple of people on our side, let out some information that should not have been let out, and so they got cold feet and walked away.
Yeah.
It was like the third worst day of my whole life. I'm just like,
and you look at it, like, it's secured work for however long, and all you got to do is just.
No, it was done. It was another company that I had that we were basically selling the company, and I was going to make 12 mil off of it directly into my bank account.
Thank you.
God in heaven, don't do it. Don't do it.
Somebody probably said around you at some point in time when there was a window open somewhere up to heaven, not saying maybe you, where you're like, wish I had an easy life. And then it's like, anytime anybody wants that shit, yeah. Wait a minute. He only has 4 children? No. They thought
it was right around that time too, actually. Why don't we just flip it?
Honey, I'm not happy. I'm not saying I'm not wanting it, but oh wow. Okay. No. Now we're getting the double-decker rooster house. I was looking at my backyard. My poor neighbors. Can you imagine being my fucking neighbor? I want to live on lots of land.
I get in trouble, and my neighbors are 3 football fields away from me.
You could yell at Bob's neighbor. You could hear the echo back come back with his voice.
Exactly.
Like a little bit after, you're like, that's a long way. So,
and I still have the old, bylaw officer knocking on my door. Hey, Bob, what are you doing, buddy? I'm like, what are you talking about? Who's complaining? Yeah. Are you kidding me?
Oh my God! Right?
Somebody's asking me. Somebody said there is no God. Dude, God's real. The next one is construction business. It was actually a waste management business. So
You know why Bob screwed it up? I'll tell him straight up. He's got no cannelloni on his end of his last name. Not Italian. Look.
No, I had a couple of partners that had all the stuff. The only thing we were missing, and we tried to get here. This is a true story. We flew out to Montreal.
Fuck.
We flew out to Montreal to do a deal to do the waste management in Quebec, because we were the largest independent waste management company in Alberta. Had a little bit in BC. Anyway, the next big spot is obviously Ontario. We literally met with the Hells Angels lawyer.
Yeah.
And they're like, literally, here's what we want if you want to be part of if you want to work in Quebec. Open up the piece of paper, close it, send it back, and said, I don't think we can do that. And they're like, well, then you won't be working in Quebec. And
I've talked to like Plum Tundra and stuff. I'm like,
oh no, turbo bumped out. Yeah, no. Yeah, it was like I say, waste management company that we ran, and we tried to get into Quebec, and the price tag, he's gone. Exactly right. The price tag to work in Quebec was insane. Like, the number was insane. It wasn't doable. So we literally flew back home and decided that we were going to continue to grow the business here in Alberta and go west before we went east. And that was back in like 2006, 2007. So, fun times. Not the Canadian Wi-Fi, buddy. You know my Wi-Fi is perfect. I've never had a problem with my Wi-Fi. It's everybody else that seems to... There we go. He's back.
Rag on our Canadian Wi-Fi. I just stuff. I'm like, okay, Baker, when he out on his patio, he probably fucked up and planted some trees that got too big. Like, I'm chainsawing down in my front yard. Don't even get me going. When you live in a place for 3 decades and you watch shit grow around you, and I'm like, I wanted some bush, but now I can't see the mountain. So now I got to cut down these 40-foot trees in my front yard, and I'm like, I'm doing it, but I'm like, well, that's a big-ass tree because I'm skinning it on the way up. So Bob doesn't mountains, but I do. And we get weird
I can see the mountains. I can see the mountains.
Our weather last night, I'm like, oh, it's going to be hot. And I'm like, now hot for us is 20 degrees right now. That's Africa. I heard the rain. I woke up and get about 3, and I'm like, the fuck is that noise? Rain. And I mean, wasn't supposed to. I'm like,
yeah, but you're literally right in a mountain valley.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Which means you can't predict anything. Like, there's no such thing as a weatherman, because he's just like, I don't know. Whatever comes over that hill is what you're getting.
And it's usually not what we think it's going to be. Like, when they call, when you see the wet coming, you can see the moisture coming. They're like, we're not quite sure what you're getting, but if it's snow, you're going to get 4 feet. If it's rain, you're going to get 4 inches, and you're going to flood. And you're like, we're not sure. Wake up in the morning, you're like, patio collapsed, tent collapsed. We got 4 feet in one night.
Holy crap!
Wow.
Well, let's hope it doesn't warm up too much. And like you say, that's because if that snowpack melts for you, then we're going to get it over here. It's going to be bad news.
Yeah,
for everybody.
And we've got that much. There are guys like still on their sleds. It's almost June. I mean, there's some guys ride year round, ice packing and stuff like this. This is the most I've ever seen my entire time of living here. So it's an unusual event, but yeah, anyway, way to go.
Yeah, no, I was by our reservoir the other day, and it's like half full. I'm like, and this is usually the time of year that it's like overflowing because there's so much coming from the mountains, but it's been so cold up here for
same with that. So
we haven't had our,
like
they've got snowed
all up the valley.
Yeah. It snowed up here like May 24th weekend. It's insane.
Yeah.
Which is that's usually the safest. The safest.
Back to the story.
Back to what?
Waste management story. I missed that part. the Italians, you got screwed over, Hell's Angels,
Oh yeah.
killed the deal.
Yeah, no. So let me just see. Somebody's asking. Yeah, we basically were our competition was Waste Management here
Oh, yeah.
in and there's a new one, GFI showed up. They come from Ontario out west. And so yeah, we did a ton of it. We did I probably shouldn't be saying this on the freaking live, but whatever. Our best year ever, we did like 36 million in 1 year with fucking waste. It was fantastic.
Or
And
garbage.
then just it's garbage. Yeah.
Yep.
Met a lot of seedy characters though. Holy crap.
Don't dig too hard over there or there in the middle, no lower than 4 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, GFL just bought our guys here. And then, of course, what do? Green for life.
Yeah, yeah.
Green money they make because everybody's rates went up, of course.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
National thing. It was a guy here. The garbage was all one owner, Old Man Carney, starter from the ground up. He had all the infrastructure. He had land. He had all the resources available. GFL came in and just bought everything. And then, of course, they're like, how do you – and this is the way of the world. How do you make any money doing this? I'm like, everything's paid for. Like for me right now, people are like, don't you have to work? I'm like, yeah, I do. But I don't have to work as much as most people because almost everything I have is paid for.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been doing this a long time. I don't have to worry about going and buying a 2-foot pipe wrench. The combat we have today is adjusting your inflation prices with fuel, changing that metric. Most people are slow on that because they're worried about not getting any work by putting the price up. And I'm like,
yeah.
Sorry, at $2.30 a liter of fuel, you want me, if I'm going to go pick up a radio, I'm doing other work and I got other shit going on. Like none of my days, it's all orchestrated by the cost of picking something up in fuel, transportation.
Yeah.
And accordingly.
I lost you there. What?
Charging accordingly for what you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
The guy in the town next up that I mopped up for, he was charging $70 an hour. I'm like, and my response, I'm like, well, I'm double what he is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, straight up, but I'm like, just saying, if he was all that in a bag of potato chips, I wouldn't be standing in front of you, would I?
It's a tough thing. Like even my dad, like when I took over, when he passed away in 2006 or whatever it was, it's 2006, he was charging $35 an hour as a business, which isn't, and I talked to him for years about it. I'm like, dude, you gotta go higher than that. Like that's crazy.
Yep. But everything.
And so when he,
but didn't because he had his overhead wasn't reflective.
His overhead was nothing.
That's what I mean. So that's why, like, I own my home. I own all the tools. I own the vans. I own everything. Those expenses that other people have, I don't. I can almost work for free. Not you repost this shit if I get phone calls. Hi, are you the free plumber? No.
I'll edit this out, man. Don't worry.
I watched Ricky, I don't know how you say his name, Ricky Gervais.
Oh, yeah.
I watched him the other day, and he's like, don't worry, Netflix will edit this out. And it was funny. That guy's not appropriate, especially in today's world. I can't believe they aired it, but I'm like, I was killing myself. It was good. That's like this. So price reflection. There's companies and people that say it, well, people won't pay that. I'm like, well, here's the thing, right?
Well, some people won't. Like when my dad passed away and I took over that year, we lost almost 80% of his clientele because they were not prepared to pay that.
They were his handshake deal guys.
Yeah.
I've got guys like that 2 to 3 decades. I'm like, I've done their work so long, I don't even charge them anymore. You just fucking go and do it. Right. And it's like, all right, we're putting a boiler in. So come on. And money. And these guys.
Yeah. That's, you make up their money on the big ones, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like some little call where I'm like, press the reset button. But in today's world, to go press that reset button is $300, $400, $500 in some places. So, you know what? Once you got to start accounting for every penny, and your overhead is a new van, equipment, $25,000 camera. I mean, we're not all Instagram influencers and are so bestowed upon us for the company to be like, do the demo camera we're probably never going to ask for back. So I don't mind a free tool.
It is true.
Some of the bigger stuff, like I'm beyond buying a crescent wrench or a pipe wrench. You see guys with the You know, Bruno from Nample, he's like a bougie tool guy. I get that. I've used a rock sometimes. You got to do what you got to do. So
Yeah. Yeah.
he's a pain in the ass, but now I'm into the big stuff. You know, looking for a $20,000 camera, and I'm like, okay, is there a comparable to Rigid? And I'll go back to Rigid if I have to, but I'm not saying that I won't try another brand. I just don't want to see some ass kisser that's never used one before. I want to see a guy like me, that's done it, that's used that equipment like I'm going to use it. How many times have you used the camera to unclean a drain, like to unblock a drain? You're like, I think I can get it with the camera so I don't have to take it 50 feet out, get covered in shit, and then put the K50 down, right? You're like, I'm just going to give it a little tap, and you're in there and you know, that thick cable, you see the ribboning come off, and you're like, you know, you got bloody knuckles because you hit, everybody's done it.
Yeah. Everybody's done it.
If you saw the staff member using your tool like that, you'd want to give him the old Louisiana milk bone. You'd be like, really? Man. What a transition business, though. All I ever heard my dad do was bitch about money when he was a contractor. He's a welding contractor. I come from long generations of welders. So all I heard him do was bitch how much he didn't make. And I'm like, maybe I'm too simple to be a welder's son, but I'm like, charge more. Dad, just charge more. And he's like, the overhead's what kill you. It's your consumables. And I'm like, okay. I put a $25 truck charge on. You know why? Cover the shit that I don't think about. Because I'm like, my time is more valuable than worried about a couple hanger clips that I didn't bill for. If I was this guy's place, half our shit came out of the truck to do that guy's house. Those, the little bits and bobs and robs,
it's tough to bill for all those, right?
Yeah.
Our truck charges, I get hassled for it quite a bit. Ours is like $85 per call. That's what it is.
You know, I don't pay for any of my tools. My clients do.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Everything that I own is paid for my clients. So you got to think about it like that. You know, if I'm able to do better work for my clients and buy better tools, you know, it's nice to see some of the innovation. A lot of tools I see on here are redundant or unnecessary, right? I watched the guy this morning, Tool Pro podcast guy. He's on there and he's got the brand new pipe vise, little self-clamping thing. And I'm like, you know that Rigid made something 20 years ago called a rapid grip, right? I'm like,
I have 4 of them downstairs.
You can't get it like deep enough. And I'm just like, buddy, calm down. And I'm like, I couldn't not. And I'm like, and what do they call it? The Amigo. You know, the brand has a threading line called an Amigo. And I'm like, hey guys, let's call it something the same other brand. And then we'll say it's innovative. And I'm like, and I don't know, maybe he's not that old, but I'm like, I own a couple. And I'm like, you know what I did? I welded one because I got the old steel one that weighs fucking 1,000 pounds. So his pipe vise didn't go big. Well, they make a 2-inch one of that rapid grip. Steel thing weighs 100 pounds. I welded that to an I-beam and I'm like, done. I don't want to take, you know, say to the guy, I'm like, it's already there. Like, you know, because he asked me, why don't you buy more? I'm like, I already made my own. And it's not, and I didn't post it. I'm not like, I use it, but I don't want to be cunty to the guy but then when I saw that today, I'm like, come on, guys, you got something on here that's just, don't be innovative.
Interesting. Like, part of the problem is you and I are, and lots of us are becoming of the vintage. It's like when the miniskirt comes back, right? That people are going to be like, oh, the short skirts, those are amazing. I'm like, dude, that was high school for me, man.
I'll be
like, what's the thing?
I'll be like, there'll be no hair, my beard. I'm going to see if I'm never going to cut this thing again, Bob. We'll see if this works out. It's a bit to keep clean, though. I don't know how people do it. I was a little bit late, and God's honest truth, I show you the stuff downstairs. I fell asleep. I'm old. Sunday, had a little nap, woke up, and I'm like, I haven't eaten anything yet. So what am I doing? I got some sourdough bread with this jam I traded a guy yesterday. It's what you do in your old antiquing.
Yeah.
Radio yesterday. And the guy makes jam. So I traded some jam yesterday with the guy. He was excited. I got some stuff for ribs. Anyway, putting the jam fresh on the sourdough bread with the peanut butter and honey. I have no fucking clue how people keep a clean beard because it looked like I just smashed my face into a plate of whatever I was eating. And I'm like, I knew it because I put I'm the condiment guy where you're like, that fucking guy used more ketchup, relish, mustard, onions, and the coleslaw than the burger can handle. And I'm like, yeah, Pigeon, when I'm with Pigeon on the mountain, people take pictures of me because I just get in there. I'm like, I don't care. I'm like Ricky Gervais. All the stuff he was saying, I'm like, I'm with you, buddy. I don't give a shit. I just keep eating. But when I felt my face and I'm like, I could feel the honey in the, so I had to go keep myself to go over. That's why I was a little bit late. God's honest truth.
Well, I knew you were doing something important.
Yep. And I could even hold up the jar of Bob's honey. I didn't want to say it other than on the live because my place, it's like not that hidden, right? People aren't going to break in and steal the video camera and shit. They're going to come for the honey.
That's true. It's very popular.
I got a baker shirt. I keep it behind the gun safe. Oh, shit. I don't even think I'm allowed to say that thing anymore. All right,
I don't think you can say the word gun anymore, man. Now you're in trouble. Now we're going to get.
I got to put my voice recognition system. Can you imagine? I posted the video of that electrician getting electrocuted. Right?
Yeah.
And so I shit you not, look at this. So that gun guy in the States goes fucking mental. Hold on. He posts a video about what he's going to do. Sends a girl he's chatting with a message saying he's going to kill all these kids. I posted a video on a video that I just swiped and posted that. Within 30 seconds of going send, by the time it took to upload, I got a fucking notice on it saying that it's, and I'm like, the guy didn't die. He fucking blew up. If you watch that, I've sent it to a few guys.
Yeah.
It's in, and the reason why a friend of mine asked me, she's like, why did that happen? I'm like, did the guy make a mistake? I'm like, yeah, his mistake was being in front of the fucking switchgear. I said, in places unlike North America where we step our voltage down in Russia, they deal with they deal with 1 million volts. We have our transmission lines. The restriction here is 600,000. Their shit is 1 million or more, 1.2 because of all the generation through their nuclear. Anyway, so when their switchgear fails, I explained it. I'm like, I told her, I said, here's the deal. So this electrician, it's some vacuum pump spring-loaded switchgear, and when it fucking lets go, usually the guy dies. I thought with that, I never actually watched the whole video because he's on the ground, he's on fire. You're like, ooh, yeah, and then he starts wiggling around, and he gets up and dusts himself off. Like, is this like, you can tell this it's real. I've got a couple where you see a lot of guys dying like that. It's horrible. And it's just because of the voltage. They step it up. So when their stuff fails, it usually just grenades. It's such a spectacular explosion.
You've seen that, like a whole mechanical room blow up. You're like, holy F.
That's why people.
So how does your video get
I know.
nuked? How does my account get taken down?
I know.
Because I have a fight with some jackass in Texas.
I know. And yet here we are. This guy's
this guy. Did you hear the whole story?
Huh?
The whole, like, I realize stuff is coming out, and I am not in any way callous or insensitive to the madness of this. But that guy's driving a brand new truck, crashes it into a ditch.
Yep.
About 4 blocks from the school, and walks to the school, gun in hand.
Yeah.
Walks around outside the school for 12 minutes. The footage is real, and then goes in. And then the cops wait for 47 minutes?
Yeah, over 45 minutes. And they're
before they go in.
And Facebook for me, literally, bing, I'm talking, Bob, it was 30 seconds. Because, you watch a thing load.
I know.
And I'm like, because I posted it, I think, to my story on my top feed. And I think I posted because what struck me as funny, my old boss, he's fucking with a water heater, commercial water heater, and I know what he's doing. He's got a metal blade screwdriver, and he's pushing a contactor in. And he wasn't the smartest guy in the world, and that's why I put his name on there. His name is Doug Harwood, not Hardwood. Anyway, so he's in there fucking around, and I can't remember why, but he was looking at an electrical issue. So I stepped out of the room. His screwdriver slipped. All I saw was a fucking flash of blue light. The cannons that AC/DC Brian Johnson would use on stage when we are about to salute you and shoot those cannons off and kill everybody in the front row. That loud. And I'm like, ooh, and I'm, holy fuck. And then all the lights go out. And then there's that poof, all the It was $100,000 of audio. It was in a bar, a nightclub.
Oh, bummer.
He fried the entire audiovisual system, cost $100,000. And I come around the corner, and there he is like this. And he's got metal flex where the screwdriver is on. The whole screwdriver's going on the handle. And he's like this. And I'm like, I'm talking to him, Doug, are you okay? And he's deaf because the fucking thing, he's blind and he's deaf. About 10 minutes to kind of, and the craziest shit, he was the second in command on the fire department, captain safety, and at work. Wow, what a contradiction.
Yeah.
Come on. I hate electricity. That's why I didn't become an electrician. It's funny, I had Alpine Plumbing and Alpine Electric asked for me at the exact same time. And I had a choice to make. And you know what I said? I'm like, all right, well, here's the thing. I'm not the smartest fucking guy. Water, shit, okay, I can see it. Just like that video, fuck, not gonna lie. I'd be the guy pumping the thing.
That's right.
I remember if it said 20 or 30 pumps. You know, what's the worst that could happen? And then hit the switch.
Let's see what happens. Make sure you cover your eyes, though, when you do it.
Yeah. And then here, in order to go do that same job, you'd have to have one of those Nomex suits with the fucking barrier in front of you, 18 watching you, thermographics on everything. And realistically, are they wrong? Because these videos, as power usage increases and more and more and more, I can't wait for all this bullshit that we sail by. What was it, 2030? We're stopping production of gasoline engines. I'm like,
they're not. That's all.
Yeah, you are.
Listen.
Yeah, you
Dude.
are.
No. It's all political pandering is all it is, man.
And money?
2030 is going to come and go, and somebody's getting paid.
I know. Oh, and then our carbon tax.
What a moron.
The money that we're having to pay, I don't know how guys are going to do it. With interest rates spiking, right? We're going to be at 7% settled out by the end of this fiscal. I'm like, oh. Just when I said it, they lifted.
True.
I don't care much, but I'm like, owing like people that are financed to the tits because everything's so expensive. Guess what? Any reserve you had's been cleaned out by fuel. Your family holiday gone. I'm like, isn't it insane? And yet Canada produce its own fuel. It's like we're Trudeau is shoving a knife into us, and I'm like, people are like, oh, he's this and that. I'm like, look, any government would have to pick up the reins for what he did. This is just a license to go. I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
Did you say 100 billion is missing? You're stupid. Who could lose $100 billion? What do you mean the Sheik of Iran? He's a close friend of mine. There's nothing wrong with that. I fully endorse Bitcoin. Like, can you imagine?
You know as well as I do, as being a self-employed businessman, that they want to know where you spent that $300. Where's that $300, Bob? If you don't provide us the receipts of that $300, we're going to audit your whole company.
You know what I told my account? Fuck it. I'm declaring a state of emergency. So I'm exempt. I'm going through some hard times. I need a 0% loan for no money, but fuck off.
I'm just going to create Baker Bucks and just start using that. Here you go.
Yeah.
Here's the money.
I do a lot of trade work, legitimately trade work, where I'm like, okay, is there something I can do for you? How much do you want for that? They'll tell me, and I'm like, all right, that's about that job. And I'm like, we'll trade. I'm like, no business, no nothing changes hands. I like it.
Yeah.
You got to get a government involved. And see it. Like, you just see it decline and fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, what could possibly, right? And just that. Now a gun registry comes back into play. I'm like, okay, I get it. I'm like, same thing, man. A hammer doesn't do a fuck. The kids today with the gun laws and the bullshit they're pumping is this. Am I for gun control? No. I want to have a rocket launcher. I would love to own one. Here's the precursor to it. I don't think that an 18-year-old kid should be able to just be like, hi, how you doing? I'm really fucking mad at the world right now, and I want to get a gun.
Yeah.
And I want to get a fully automatic, and everybody with the AR-15, the assault weapon. So here's the thing. A hammer is just a hammer. And work, kids, it takes work. A gun doesn't do a damn thing until you pick it up and point it at somebody and pull the trigger. Gun laws, yes. I want to have a background check. Who are you? Do you have felonies and past history? Let's give it a ball. It's not perfect, but it's better than what they're fucking doing now.
It's better what they're doing now.
Want to own a
Well,
gun?
I don't like
Yeah.
you've seen that stuff all over the place, and on lots of levels I agree with it. I don't know why you don't have like security guards at every school. Like if you can send, the problem is you can send $40 billion to secure Ukraine.
I know.
Then there's no money that you can't hire a veteran to sit there at the school.
Veteran that's like, we've given all we can give. We don't have any more money. Then there's a hurricane in Haiti and $1 billion there, and you're like, you see where they live in the shanties. You're like, where'd the fucking money go? And then the president walks out in his palace where virgins are sprinkling rose petals at his feet, and you're like, oh,
yep, there it is. There's the money.
Yeah, where's the money? We're broke. I see what's going on right now. What a redistribution of wealth. And talk about the money laundering. I'm like, ooh, can you imagine?
Dude, I don't know how, like, if I ran for Premier of Alberta today and won, like tomorrow, I would have at my disposal about $100 billion.
Can you imagine?
Like the purse strings. Like I would literally say, you know what I'm doing tomorrow? I'm bringing Turbo from BC, and he's going to run my infrastructure program, and here's the money.
I, Robert Satchery, hopefully carry out this corrupt office. Could you say it?
And the beauty is, like day one, I'd be like, and there ain't nothing you buggers can do about it for 4 years. So F you.
Win. You know what? I'm
gonna spend it all.
The other party, just in case I fuck up, I've made smoochy with the other person.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if you try to get me out, where everyone's like, "What's happening?" We're man, it's to watch it, to be a part of this in this day and age with what's going on. I'll thank Christ that I'm at the age where I get to not have to live with this that much longer, because I'm like, I'm going to sail in retirement.
Yep. No,
I'm not retired, but like the bullshit that people think. Okay, there's no retirement in my world yet. No, because I'm cheap.
Listen, Rob, that was one comment that was supposed to be funny. Fucking relax, will you? I have said to my kid, it's my kid's problem. I'm like, dude, I don't know how you guys are going to deal with it. I won't have to deal with it. I don't know how you guys are going to deal with it, because it's going to be.
I mean, we're going to sit, and that's like the end of the world prophecies, all the stuff that comes and goes. The computers of 2000, they're going to shut the nuclear power plants down. You know, when we get to 2030 and we sail past your little milestone of we're stopping gasoline engine production.
Okay, sure.
You know what? There's certain things in the world that aren't logical. It should damn near be, this will be a hard one for people to grunt around, but we make how many varieties of different things? I'm like, make 5 car bodies that are all very linear and motor adjustable, change things off, make them redesigning, new models, new everything.
But you can't, because nobody can make money at it.
I know, but I'm like, here's the thing. That's why the government, my kids fighting with Cassie and Calvin, the government's here to help you. I'm like, the fuck they are.
No, they're not.
They cared about you so much, you wouldn't be able to buy alcohol and cigarettes, where they're like, #1 tax thing. They're like, fucking get it out there. All right. Who's the idiot in here that said we'd be able to charge $20 for a fucking pack of cigarettes? Did we fire that guy? Didn't we call him a bunch of bad words that we can't say now, but we got rid of him? What happened to that? Oh, that guy killed himself. Oh, that's too bad. Mental illness, you know. And if he was in today's office, we'd give him more money and we would have got a raise and a bonus.
Yep.
Like, the government's not here for you. Government's here for themselves. It's unbelievable. And
the killer is how many Nazi movies do we have? Right? And how bad they are. Why don't we have any movies about what Lenin and Stalin and all those freaking yahoos did? All the people that they legit murdered to set up their new economy.
Do we have a lesser form of filth with what we have now? I'm like, you watch Trudeau, when the need for you to zip over there was for what? Like, we preach, Bob, we expect you to tighten your belt, okay? I want recycling, separate your garbage. You better be a penny pincher, man. We're going to weigh your garbage coming. Got food going in, waste going out. Bah. And then you see these guys, fuck it, let's go to Ukraine. Pile everybody. You know, how many people?
It's not even
12.
It's not even those guys. So I'll have to check my facts, but I'll say this out loud. So the U.S. reduced their carbon footprint by about 80,000 cubic tons last year.
Yep.
Guess who increased theirs by 120,000 cubic tons?
Not China.
Say that. Like it's a losing game.
I've had too much coffee today. I'm pretty wired up already watching my dad's news.
So you literally have to make sure you separate your plastic and your paper.
I know.
While the industrial machine in China is literally polluting the entire world like crazy.
So you know how
it makes no difference.
The facts come up on Facebook. You know, the one thing I love about Facebook, which I really do, is the fact thing that comes up, where they're like, last year you posted this. And it was exactly that. It was just a couple days ago. The reduction in amount, and I think I might have took a screenshot of it. I'll send it to you later. It'd be like, this is like 2020, and this was a carbon emission, how Canada's reduced it by this much, and then China's just red stroked all coal technologies, and they go the volumetrics of it. And you're like, and this is like, they can't build coal-fired power plants fast enough.
Fast enough.
We need to clean it up here. You're like, they don't have they get wet. They got it for the coal dust that comes out of China. Whoop, whoop, whoop. So you can see where you're going. That ain't for rain. You know, the rain goes off the windows. Can you imagine? Like, talk about, and we are somehow in Canada, one of the, like, I think we're on the world of 200. We're 210th down the list of carbon producers. So thank fuck God we're squeezing the nuts of every Canadian. Right?
No.
Yeah. It's wild.
Jimmy's saying he's going to recycle the beer can he's drinking from. Don't do it, man. Hey. Don't recycle it. It'll make no difference. Like, none.
No.
Throw it in the Chicago River. Are you in Chicago right now, or are you in Arizona?
If you throw it on the ground, technically you're recycling because it came from the ground.
Exactly.
8% of the world's crust is aluminum. There's a
all they're gonna do, Jimmy, is they're gonna put it on a boat and ship it back to China and dump it in a river in China.
And some people take apart the chemicals, right? And then because they're not paying nothing. Can you imagine? What did I see? What is Apple paying their people $22 an hour now? Frontline staff. Everybody gets, the guy walking in that doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. He's getting paid $22 an hour. I'm like, hoo, hoo, hoo. Oh.
It's time to raise your rate.
That's just it. And then, of course, now you pay the guys $10 an hour more. It's really strange, Bob. I put $10 an hour more on my labor rate. Funny how that works. And then I increase it a little more. Fuel.
Right? Like, you have to.
Are you kidding me? A lot of driving. You guys as well, right? I mean, sometimes I drive like hour and a half to 3 hours one way to go do a job.
Yeah.
Your client, they got a place wherever, it doesn't matter. I'm like opposite ends of the valley. Like my truck, I got to get a new pickup. It's only 6 years old, but it's got 170, almost probably 180,000 K on it. It's trying to kill me. So is it perfect? No, but it's time for a new truck. I go down, I'm like, $84,000 fucking dollars.
It's insane.
Like, woo! How much?
Yeah.
84 grand. I'm like, and I said, I
just lease it. Just lease it, Rob. Finance it.
Here's the thing. I mean,
I'm with you, man.
I don't know. I'm like, I look at guys coming, starting out. You want to buy an old, remember when, I think we probably talked about this before, you could go buy a $200 car back in the day. You ain't buying you could buy a $200 car now, and then you're like, oh, this little part right here is busted.
Yeah.
$4 with fuel in 30 a liter, you can't afford to pay attention. Fuck.
Yeah. No.
Ooh, it hurts.
It's getting crazy. See, like Jimmy's telling us that all his stuff is recycled brass. That's awesome. Jimmy's gonna come. We're gonna get Jimmy on here one of these days. He just had a baby girl. Did you see that?
Blown valves are made of all recycled brass. You know what?
I'm trying to remember her name. Emerson Sloan Allen. That's what I think. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yep.
If Jimmy's still here, he can correct me, but I think it's Emerson Sloan Allen. Congratulations.
things that I liked about Rigid was the fact that they do foundry to their warehouse literally right there, 50 miles. They literally pour the steel right in the next town. They got a rail car that interconnects it. I don't know why, because you could, well, whatever. That's how they ship stuff. And I'm like, whoop, right? So how cool is that? Emerson, right? And then Rigid Company. That's who owns Rigid, the parent company, which is probably owned by Coca-Cola or something. You keep going, you're like, there's one guy at the top.
It goes to France. Everything goes to France somehow.
No kidding. I always love that. This is the best one. All the shit that's going on in Ukraine right now, and people are freaking out. And I'm like, I like shutting people up. Oh, wow, what if they go nuclear? He's threatening this, threatening that. I'm like, maybe you should Google how many countries have tested how many nuclear weapons above ground, under the ocean. Imagine detonating a 50 fucking kiloton nuclear weapon in the ocean. France has done
kill?
France has done 70 of them. You know what it kills? The shockwave in its own kills. Bob, you better recycle that cardboard.
Right.
The water tower that explodes a kilometer into the stratosphere. Everything within 3 kilometers is dead. The amount of death, the smell must be disgusting. And I'm like, so they're like, Vladimir Putin's going to nuke the world. I'm like, yeah, well, it ain't not that big a deal. You know why? Thousands of these things have been detonated. Everybody's so scared of the nuclear atrocities. We're all going to die.
Yeah.
You know what? Did you watch the David Attenborough special where he's going through Chernobyl?
Yeah.
He's literally walking through Chernobyl, and they're like, nuclear is so bad. It's got a half-life of like 4 billion years. You're never going. Then there's David Attenborough. I mean, fair enough. The guy's, I don't think he's dead yet, but he's 96, I think, now. And as he's chatting away, he's like, there's wolves and all animals, nature, adapt, overcome. It was that mushroom. It was one of the, how nature takes over. I'm like, it does what it's going to do. And literally, it was, I think they had 48 hours. They came in and said, everybody's over 48 hours, you're going to die. Everybody out. And they literally, an entire city moved. It was wild, right? Crazy shit.
Yeah, that 3 Mile is good. Well, I was thinking of when I went through Yellowstone a while back, and they had that massive wildfire that went through there, and all the environmentalists were freaking out. We've destroyed this, God's wonderland, whatever the hell they said.
How lush was it, Bob?
Yeah. No, and they're like, actually, we were wrong. Things are better than ever. So
you're not trusting the science very much for me here, Bob. Can you imagine?
Listen, trust the science has been ruined for everybody. Anybody that actually believes. Oh, so here we go. Let's bring it up. What's happened? Where do they get? What's the catchphrase for monkeypox?
No.
Quebec is already bringing out the smallpox vaccine for the monkeypox.
I don't know, man.
Okay, here we go. Round 3. How many people still believe these guys? I don't even know.
But people still belly up to the bar and they still take the shit. I'm like, I don't understand.
I don't understand it. Everything that they said a year, you could do your. We should do a retro to a year ago, where the K is silent. It is the money pox, but where they said everything about COVID. Every single thing they said about COVID and the vaccine, wrong.
Well, they debunk it.
Wrong.
They disprove it, and they're like, oh, here's the best one. They're like, all right, okay, who does everybody trust? Who's the guy? You're like, okay. New England Journal of Medicine. Is that high enough for you? That's the benchmark, the best. They say eat shit, people are eating shit. So they're like, masks don't do anything. They produce a paper. They're like, nope, it's bunk. It's bullshit. You pass some dude driving, he's got a diaper on his face. You're like this.
How are people, I'm sorry, and I don't want to be mean or crass, but how are people still wearing masks?
I don't know.
It doesn't, the first time they put them on 2 years ago, I'm like, dude, I've worked I know you have too, in environments where you actually need that shit, right?
Even the correct fitting shit that you have to adjust nonstop.
You got to duct tape it all off. You got to duct tape it.
You got to have a clean shaven face.
Yeah.
The best one that you see is the guys wearing the N95 masks, the holy shit ones, the rubber cup ones, all that. And you know what your test is for those masks? You can get your rate on, you get your bullshit. Nope. You give them to a drywall crew. clean shaving them up, and you're like, go. Those mud monkeys get in there. You could have the house kicked off. You do
They can't breathe. They're shooting chalk out of their nose.
Yes, Mrs. Wilkins' underwear drawer has got a finger line across it, and you're like, and the mud monkeys, they take it off, and you can see where the leak marks are, and then they go, and you're like, whoa, oh my God. Wow. So when they said all that, I'm like, if it's a spittle thing, I understand that of it. But if you're saying, because when they were shot, my ex-wife got, I think it was 7 of the long straw tests. And I'm like, she sent me in because she was very panicked on everything. She watched the fucking News Daily, and I'm like, when she left, I was like, got rid of cable.
Shut it off.
Everything. Shut it off, man. You know what? I'm like, I got into the psycho bullshit with her. I will say I maybe picked up some design things where I'm like, I can make a room flow better because all the home and garden television I watch, but the news, I don't miss. Ugh.
There was a chick on Instagram that literally, she was sick for 4 days. And took 4 tests a day. And on the last day,
she got it.
So she's like 16 tests in. She's like, I'm positive. I'm like, oh, finally, you've done it. You've done it.
And with my ex, because I'm like,
and I'm wait. And I'm actually feeling better. I'm like, what? So you literally felt like shit for like 3 days. All your COVID tests came up negative, and on the last day, you're actually feeling better. Oh, positive. She didn't go to work for the next week and a half because she's positive.
Feels good. Already infected the world because she was suspected. I'm like, and then the
goat. Jimmy's saying the goats are next.
Goat pox.
The goat pox.
At least you can eat it.
It'll make you grow a wicked beard, though.
Well, that's why I haven't got a goat. I'm gonna start with chickens. I think start small. My poor neighbors, right? I'm gonna make a multi-level thing.
Can you do chickens in your town?
Oh yeah, of course we can. I don't think there's a restriction on how many. So I was thinking like a little long linear fence chicken run thing. So I got lots of space for that. Take a few trees out. And then a double-decker thing. And I'm like, because who's going to afford to eat anymore? So if I can buy chicken feed and make meat birds, Turbo Slaughterhouse.
I'm telling you.
There'll be chicken wings for Super Bowl. I'll be the wing guy.
Now, I've had a few guys going, why are you hatching all these chickens? Because I'm slaughtering everyone that's out there this year. And they're all going in my freezer. And these little buggers are going to start the cycle all over again.
Yes.
Because what are you going to do?
Well, are you kidding me? We're paying right now more for regular food than we used to pay for organic food. When my wife left, she was buying $30 chickens, $30 for an organic chicken. That's a few years ago. So I'm like, what's that same chicken today? I go to Costco and I'm like, oh, my ass puckered. I think I blew the lady behind me a kiss because I'm like, does that piece of meat say $258? Costco, they're like, cut the roast in half because the Asian people are passing out $347 for a fucking prime rib. That used to be $100. And I'm like, ranchers, I've watched some of these rancher shows lately. These guys need guns to protect them from fuckers like me because I'm like, what's a cow worth?
Well, that's where it's going to go, right? What do you think? What's going to happen?
Yeah.
You're going to have people slaughtering cows in the middle of a field that have no idea what they're doing. I just bought a whole cow that I had butchered, and it's in my fridge, freezer. Because I'm like, what the hell is what they say?
I know.
All these, what is it, like the 20th chicken, like industrial chicken plant is caught on fire this year? 20.
Yeah, I know.
That's not weird.
Nope. And they don't rebuild. Like the food distribution centers, you watch all the stuff that's going on, then you start Googling it, and you're like, what are we doing? What? And then Ottawa has a massive storm, and then they need a bunch of shit brought in on trucks. And I'm like, whoo, oh, the irony. Oh, man, that's funny shit. I'm like, woo, baby.
It's going to be a crazy winter.
We're running this, Charles. We didn't want to tell you the address. It's on Google Maps. Fuck. Hey, guys, I thought we tried to get Parliament Hill off this fucking thing. He won't deliver it again. Richard Esterhazy. They don't even call him Justin Trudeau because no one will do shit for the guy.
They do. He was out in Kamloops.
I know.
They booed him out. He
Yeah.
canceled all his events and went home.
Everybody pretty cranky. Yeah. More money. More money.
Yeah. Wow. You know somebody's making a mint off of it. All his buddies.
Anybody driving any less? Think of the revenue coming in from the fuel tax right now.
Wow.
Fuck.
I don't know. I don't know the numbers, but I do know that the petroleum companies are making it hand over fist right now.
Oh, yeah.
Hand over fist.
Can't not. That's why I'm like, some of the rig startups and stuff and buddies that are in that industry, it's like, oh man, money.
I saw Jagmeet got chased out too. Chased out by his. Now listen, he got chased out by his own Sikh people. Like it wasn't. Like I realize I'm the devil of the world because I'm a white heterosexual male. Yeah, exactly.
I can relate. Why do you think I got the little poopy?
But he got chased out by his own dudes.
How awesome is that?
I didn't see a white dude anywhere giving him shit. It was literally like they were all coming after him. I'm like, wow, good for you, man. And he's gonna call. Did you see his tweet? That he had, as he's going through, people are grabbing at him, and they pulled on his Rolex, and he has never been. I don't even know what the word he used. Like he was never so scared in his whole life because they're yanking at his Rolex. I'm like, how disassociated from the world do you need to be?
Isn't he in a racist family himself?
He is now. Again, I'm saying stuff that I don't know all the facts to. But he's literally on Interpol's wanted list now. Look it up.
I remember reading something about where he's like on the wanted terrorist, and it's like, how does this guy get on here? I'm like, now I know
he's on the Interpol list.
I know on Instagram I fuck around a lot. Now I'd like to apologize to John Thompson for getting his name on the FBI most wanted list, okay? But I know buddies too. We like to fuck around the side of the thing. Maybe that's how he got it. I don't know. Where's your background check for this guy?
Right? Like anywhere I go, I gotta prove who I am.
Yeah.
Well, here's a story for you. So just last week, I'm at my daughter's basketball game. It's at the YMCA. I don't have my ID on me. and I've been there 6 times. And there's a little old lady there, and she's like, I know. I need to see your ID. I'm like, this is me. This is me. Anyway, long story short, the cops end up showing up. They called the cops on me. And were going to escort me out of the gym. It was a huge kerfuffle. All the parents. Anyway, thankfully, I have the gift of the silver tongue, so I talked my way out of it.
Who vouched for you? You're like, wow, okay.
And so that's where we're at now.
Yeah.
Anyway, the world has literally gone mental. And the guy's excuse was, we're trying to protect the children. I'm like, me flashing a card at you from 10 feet away is not protecting the children. You can't read that. You don't know who that is.
And it matches my identification. You didn't even look at it.
No.
Have you ever had a fake ID, Bob? I got in once. So,
yes. No.
That same worker that was get killed by the guy coming through the stoplight.
Yeah.
He went down to a Canucks game one time, and I get box seats for the Canucks. People call me up like, "Fucking, how much fun is this?" Turbo. Yes. It's 3:00 on a Friday. Canucks are playing Detroit. Do you want to go to the game? And I know what seats there. I'm like, yes. What do? We drive straight to the game in the plumbing truck. Vancouver ain't the safest place in the world. I'm like, you know how much money we got in tools in the truck, right? So, now, because I'm a cheap ass, I park in like a pretty good part of the neighborhood, so we got to walk like 6 blocks.
Yeah.
So giver. We get there. I'm me. I got a dirty work shirt on. I'm wearing Carhartts. Cody, he looks like a fucking drug dealer, to be fair. Tall, skinny kid. Couldn't grow a beard to save life. You know that guy? So, of course, this is the best shit. I'm the responsible one. So they let me go through. Cody they took like a knife or something. Can't remember what he had. He had something in his pocket. And I'm like, I giggle because they let me go through, okay? Metal detectors, the whole thing, okay? All that shit.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know what hurts? I got a box cutter. I got all my tools, right? I got a razor blade knife that goes that long. And there's this this is the funniest thing. There's a black guy there. He must have been 7 feet tall. This guy must have weighed 400 pounds. Like brick shithouse. He was a big man, but he was fucking huge. And I walk up to him like, excuse me. And I said, my friend there, they just took his knife away. I think it was his grandpa's knife, which was a big deal. And I'm like, we want it back. He's like, you're not getting it back, this and that. And then I'm like, when I started to hear some shit go on, then I went back and I'm like, what's going on? Then I called the dude over and I'm like, I pulled out all my shit. And I'm like, here's what I just got through security with. And the guy's like, he looks at the guy. You can see that disappointed father look.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, here's the thing, okay? Now, I would just appreciate all the shit back. I'm not saying you guys aren't doing a good job. I said, for fuck, man, there's going to be 20,000 people. I get it. But I'm like, this is to show you that little flash badge thing, they let me clear.
Yeah.
Do I look like a reasonably sane person to you?
I can attest that you're not.
I was wearing a baseball cap in my shit, but I'm like, I pull all the stuff out and I hand it over. And I'm like, and the guy's like, all he said to me is this. He goes, he looks around, he goes, I'm a bit noticeable. And I'm like, no kidding. I said, can't imagine why. I said, it's your light complexion. And he's black ass. So he's like, come and find me at the end of the game. You can have all your stuff back. And he's like, I really appreciate for you not being an asshole about this. And I'm like, not a big deal. Found him after the game. Everything went smooth. But that's like the face masks and the jab and this bullshit and everything that we're involved in. I'm like, wait till these cases are through.
That's the problem. Is everybody thinks that they have the right to ask you your personal information now.
You don't.
Who are you and what are you doing? I'm like,
look at the
I'm going
Johnny
to watch
Depp.
a basketball game. Piss off.
You're guilty before you get proven innocent anymore. And I'm like, innocent until proven guilty. That's how somehow is twisted. Again, we can't track a pedophile. Can't track a pedophile because it's a violation of his fucking rights. Right. I say word wrong on this live. We're shadow banned. There's fucking shit going on. The police are at my door. Did you say you were going to what? And I'm like, sorry, what about my right? I want a fucking rocket launcher. Why can't I? Because somebody blew one day and it was like, now it's deemed bad. I'm like, so you could say and do whatever you want. And then a murderer. There's a lady in Vancouver that just sent me drunk driving. And she killed this beautiful little girl. She must have been maybe 4 or 5 with her grandma. And they were feeding a horse. And this drunk driver lady and her lawyer got her off.
Got her off. And I'm like, how about you accept the judgment? How about you just to take acceptability and response? All these words, there's no responsibility, accountability. This guy, when I went and did the job, like, he'd been fucked over listening to his story. First word out of the inspector here, because he did the work, it was a framing company that built the house. He's like, the guy's an asshole. And I'm like, first thing out of the guy's mouth, because I'm like, hey, you know, I'm going up to Lillibet. I'm working where you guys are. And I'm like, oh, blah, blah. And he's like, that guy's an asshole. And I'm like, okay, I don't judge anybody. If I hear it, if I go to the post office and I talk to 10 people and they're like, that guy's an asshole, I'm like, chances are, this guy's probably a dick. Like, and so business interaction is. So I'm like, now I see what it is. I'm like, that's just in business. You know, you don't listen to what people say. Find out don't precursor anybody. And all the stories that people tell, I'm like, because you don't get to hear the truth of it. And the guy had been fucked around by so many people. I'm like, okay, we'll be here tomorrow. We'll be done by Friday. I'm like, I'll have you inspection ready so you can spray foam, whatever you got to do, get her done. And the guy's like, okay. You had to see the look on his face when we showed up on Wednesday. Fucking trucks packed to the nuts because we had to drive up. I had to pull a business license for another town, all this stuff. And I'm like, then we show up and I'm like, whew, boy, the paperwork, man. Load all the shit in his house. We start working. And I'm like, we sleep there. We're there the next day. We do it. And the guy's still like, thank you for coming. So appreciative because he'd been lied to by everybody. Concrete guy, Monday. I think the concrete guy poured his shit on Friday and Saturday. There was an emergency concrete pour. I'm like, what? That doesn't happen very often.
We got a batch mixed up for this guy. Fuck him. You're going to get it all. We'll give it to you. I'm like, you have to pre-mix that stuff and you got to calculate the chemical content. I'm like, when you pour it, I don't know. And what does the guy do? He's got, you know what he's got? He's got no options because people don't service the area. You can come from the next town over Kamloops, but guys get sick of that and it's hard to get them. And then, so once I went up, I'm like, I could see working here.
Yeah, well.
I
There's
don't preach.
that's the good thing. What I've said to the boys is the amount of available work, if you want to do it, will be endless
Oh, yeah,
because there ain't nobody that can do it anymore.
no. And guess who's going to get all the money? Me. I don't need the money anymore.
Yeah, but
Right? How thick does the steak have
that's
to be? I'll take the
that's
odd
the,
interest call. You know,
yeah.
listen to the story where the guy's absolutely that guy that I helped, his wife, can we make it that, like, I'm like, you know what you can do? Fuck off. This is a religious guy. Religious. He's a son of a pastor. And I'm like, I'm telling you, man, I'm like, you guys, because they kept coming and saying, thank you, thank you. I'm like, this is me to both these people. It's a little dainty, like, beautiful lady. Guy's 52, is our age, right? And I'm like, Bob, there's nobody looking around. I swing around like this. I'm like, would you fuck off? I'm like, I get it, but I'm like, I'm like a pissed off Tasmanian devil. I got a fucking sawzall at one point in one hand, and I'm drilling and I'm cutting, and I'm like, dangerous
Exactly.
as shit. Like, I got to get this roughing done. I'm like, me and Rael did 3 weeks worth of work in 3 days.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm like, coming up, thank you. And I'm like, and his wife, it was like a Bill Murray skit. We would come in like the next day and we'd leave at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. We'd come back first thing in the morning, like show up early. The fucking place was spotless.
No, she's cleaning it all.
She vacuumed. They've been waiting for this house. They're 40% over budget. They're 40% over this. Their timeline's fucked. Like Tuesday, he wanted to hang himself. I show up. I'm like, I look at him. I just listen. You know, the comedy. I didn't look at the blueprint. I didn't even look at the fixture count. I looked at nothing. I listened to his story. I'm like, how much was it the plumber? He goes, this much money. I'm like, add $2,000. I'll do it. He goes, done. We shook hands. We showed up on the Wednesday with enough material to pipe 2 houses. Done. And got it all together. And that was it. And I'm like, I mean, would I want to work like that nonstop? You couldn't. But for a push, you got to get it done. Guys don't do that anymore. They were gobsmacked. These guys were just like, he said Friday. He thought I meant next Friday. I'm like, we're ready to fill it up tomorrow. And we came back on the Saturday and we did the fill test because I'm like, technically we're done the glue joints, but I'm like, I'm a little apprehensive to fill a system we just did. It'll probably hold, but we'll come back tomorrow. And then we stayed over overnight, filled it on the Saturday morning. We called her a day. So 3.5 days ish.
That's the amazing thing, though, right? And even in my own life, when shit hits the fan, the capabilities that you have, or that it was shocking to me when I fired 18 people.
Yeah.
And on a Monday, knowing the week that I had scheduled, at the year I had scheduled, you're just like, okay, well, I'll see the family in a year from now.
Yep.
And it wasn't problem free and certainly wasn't stress free, but I fulfilled every commitment that I said I would do. And you look back at those moments, I'm like, when you have the experience and the skill set that you've crafted, then when it really comes, like when you really need it.
Well, when you need to be able to make something in the field where you go, you know what? It's a Saturday. This is pretty important. I think I've got one of these at another. Guys don't go to that level anymore.
No.
I can weld one at my house. I can bring a welder in. I can save you now. And I've done this. I've welded, it's stuff you can't do. The boiler safety, I can't fix that. I'm like, call my dad. I'm like, what do you do? You would have, if your father was still alive and you had a problem, you could fix it. You thought your dad could have. And your dad, guess what? Bob can't figure another one out. They'd be like, he'd come and help you and he'd be so fucking happy. I call my dad. I can feel it. My dad's not a flavorful man. There's no happy. He's not smiley. He is fucking the opposite of me. If he was on this live, he's just a stone face. And you're like, but when he gets mad, he gets red and he gets shit's flying. Like it's Eddie Murphy. It's a series, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. The old guys coming, we're going to make the fucking money. Because I tell you, here's the best thing too. Never made more money, Bob.
I'm with you.
I'm like, and walk in like a jackass, go and I'm like, get this, I want that. And they're like, pretty much, yes, sir. But you'll come though.
Yeah. Well, I'm not as much of a jackass as you are.
I'm pretty cunty towards people. I'll say it. People that have been with me, they're like, I, I, I just had, this is one of the best ones. I just had one, how long ago was this? About maybe a month ago. I had the president, the owner of a bank, the owner, because I'm like, I told you years ago, I'm not doing your work anymore. I don't give a shit. Fuck you. The guy calls me on holiday from Europe. And I'm like, because how fucked he was. I'm like, I know. And I'm like, I've done your work. Here's the interesting thing. You'll probably say this too. People that have told you, not politely, some people don't pay this out. I've tried to resolve some issues. I'm like, and then I say, look, I'm clamping down. I'm like, I'm not a fucking bank. Anybody that was over 60 days, fuck off.
Yeah, yeah.
Now I brought it down even closer. So this operation that would pay me, I'm like getting pissed off. Ugly work. They question the bills. You can question bills, but I'm like, when you know when it's getting a little exorbitant, where you're like, you're questioning much. This is why the owner of this company had to call me, and I'm like, e-transfer, buddy. I shouldn't have to tell you that, but I'm like, because he goes, I'm overseas. I'm like, you took some time out of your busy schedule to call me, and you're in Europe, and you wanted to make sure that I was going to do the job for you. If I say,
Yeah, yeah.
unlike some other people you maybe have done business, if I tell you we're going to do it, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
You're going to deal with paperwork later, like we're going to have some shit going on.
Spend the money.
Because for whatever reason, it's like in the phone book, it says for really weird shit, call Turbo. The pictures, and you're like, nobody's ever heard of the shit we're finding. I'm like, what is it? Do you have any wood carving? How's your wood carving skills? Because I think the pipe's wooden. I'm like, a wood stave? I'm like, well, you know, how do you the whole saw?
Because you're the hillbillies of BC, man. That's what happens out there.
Well, you know what it's made? It's miners and farmers, and they're both interchangeable with wit and how they get shit done. You're like, you look up, you're like, that's the stupidest.
But does
You
it
know
work?
what? It works. As fucked up as that is, you know what? It's older than me. And click, wow, it still runs.
Yeah.
The shit I'm finding, I'm like, we complicate so much. I'm like, look at the boilers we install.
It's true.
And you're like, how many more sensors could you put on it to make it any more efficient? Because when I come in at Christmas and I'm like, hold on, I got to plug in my module. Here we go. I'm going to plug in the tablet. Click.
Yeah.
And then, wait, hold on. I think I called this one Rachel. Is that waitress at the coffee shop? Hello, Rachel. How are you today? How are you feeling? Oh, Turbo, my O2 sensor's a little dirty. I'm like, and
which I like.
And you're gonna
so where does that go?
It's in the States. It's in Korea, because the shit that's coming, all the stuff sitting on container ships. I'm like, we're starting to see. We were seeing 4 to 6 weeks was a normal shipping. Then we started to see 6 to 8 to 12, 16 weeks. Now we're getting told in months. Tell me you're wrong. They don't say weeks, in like 3 to 6 months. And you're like, oh, fuck. You get a big contract where you got, say, $600,000-$700,000 on the line. You get fucked.
So we're doing that at a couple commercial restaurants, and they spec Kohler toilets, 18 months.
Yeah. Yep.
Like for a Kohler toilet to show up in my doors a year and a half away, I'm like, we'll be finding some subs. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Well, you're going to go down your list. You're going to be like, at the end, you're going to be like, yeah, look at this thing. 58 weeks for a rooftop. 58 weeks. You're like,
yeah.
I went to get a brand new van. Two new vans. I was going to replace the fleet. And guess what the guy has to say to me? I'm like, I'll take 2 all-wheel drives. Let's just.
2 years.
The guy's like, 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years.
Can you imagine how much of your life changes in 2 years? Will you even need those things in 2 years? I don't even know.
I don't know. I'm going to be a pickup truck owner, I think. I'm going to go over to change some shit, because I'm like, the driving here is ridiculous. You make more money doing emergency service work anyway. My boiler contracting license, all that gas fitting, all that equipment I own, I turn in every other plumber. I'm like, fuck it. No more combustion analyzers. Literally, I could put a master bedroom where my shop is right now, 20 by 20, and play fucking basketball in it. That's appealing to a guy now. You know, sounds ridiculous, but I'm like, I'm going to play, like, I could put a full-size pool table in the place. I could get rid of all these tools and probably make more.
Yeah. Streamline it.
Yeah, streamline the business down a little bit as I evolve and change, right? I thought Calvin was going to stay. I thought we were going to make some moves on that. He didn't. And that's his life. He could do whatever he wants. He's in psychology at SFU. No problem, right? I'm like, your path. But my way, he should have stayed with the school. He should have finished the plumbing, then went off to university.
Yeah.
Because the ability he's got and how he was with clients was phenomenal, right? I'm like, oh, you'd want 10 of him. I could do probably literally 20 times the business if I had 10 guys like that. And it's here. You just can't do it. You can't find the workers.
You just can't do it.
No.
Well, no, and I'm with you. Like you say, we talk with like Navient and NTI and Vesta, and I'm like somebody's got to service all that crap in the next 5 to 7 years, right? Like it's going to be an industry of its own.
Let on the parts, because what you're going to get to is this as well. Yeah, you go in. There's this one job that we're on. Rail's actually insulating it. The boiler room. I'll show you. And I giggle. I'm like, so I walk in the room. And I'm like, I look up, we're doing the whole room, the whole mechanical room. It's Africa because of the insulation that's not there right now. So we're insulating the whole heating system. So I look, and there's 2 huge NTIs. I didn't check the model number, but I'll be back in there. The house, the build cost is $20 million. That's what it costs to build. That's what it costs for the cheap kids in there in the background. The fucking house costs $20 million for construction.
Holy
Shows
moly.
2 NTIs on the wall. And I'm like, I look and I'm like, I'm there just looking at the insulation job. Okay, this is how much we're going to need. We got enough to do it. I'm pretty sure we got everything. I look and I'm like, the regulator is about 2.5 feet from the boiler. And I'm like, I look up and there's rust all over the gas line. And I'm like, and the guy's like, they kept on ignition. They were this big fucking, I'm like, and I, not even fucking 10 minutes before dude came in, the general for this guy, I'm like, I point to the reg. I'm like, kind of 10 feet after the reg. I said, this is wrong. And I said, these things are going to get build up gas pressure and it's going to be a detonation. Dude comes in, he's like, it's rusty because of the detonation. And I look at the guy and I'm like, where's the inspector here?
Yeah.
I said, let me dumb it down. And this is me to the kid. Let me dumb it down for you a little bit. You know, you're a little bit younger than me. I'm like, that's 3 meters to you younger kids these days.
Right.
Well, the code, it's all metric, right? So I'm like, I said 10 feet. The kid's like, look at this fucking geriatric. And I'm like, 3 meters, buddy. And I'm like, does that look like the whip curl? All of it combined isn't even a meter. Right? I'm like, the friction, let alone you are fighting that reg the whole way. And I'm giggling. I'm like, this is in a $20 million house, Bob. 20 million. We're talking, I would have an engineer, he'd sneeze and my nose would run a little bit. He'd be so far up my ass watching the shit I'm doing. And this house, tell you how much power they got, Bob. Bob, they got boilers that heat the house, hey? Do you know how much electricity they have in this place? 500 amps, and they fucking use it all. And the rain runs right over top of them. Insulated?
Oh, yeah.
Nope. And I'm like, it was raining in the winter, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, I undid a 4-inch plug because I thought I was going to get in the clean out and clean the sewer out.
Yeah.
Rainwater line, 100% full. I got a 4-inch column of water. I was,
I think I remember that. I can't remember that.
I was so fucking cold. I'm like, woo! I was like, oh, there's me. This, like I said, this is a rich man's house. I'm like, water is running down the fucking hallway. And I'm like, because the main sewer's plugged. I'm like, okay. And then the rainwater line, I'm like, what the fuck is that? Like, where'd all the water come from? And I tried. I couldn't get her back on. It was a 4-inch column straight at me. And because I already looked at the room, the 500 fucking amp panels are right behind me. So I'm like, I'm standing there shielding the fucking column of water. I'm like, and it was, there I am. The guy's probably got cameras in the house maybe, but there I am lying naked on the fucking guy's floor, just like, has blue lips. And I'm like, and the whole place is crazy. Jeez, get involved in it. And then I'm like, there I am. I'm outside at whatever time it was. It was some ridiculous time. I'm outside naked, soaked. Who cares? I'm like, oh, like I'm outside naked, soaked. Who cares? I'm like, oh, like I always keep the rig suits in the truck, right? A couple of them. And I'm like, oh, I wore 2 of them on my arm. I was so chilled. The guys come in like, I'm like, ooh, I was mad. Ooh, I got phone wet. I always keep the rig suits in the truck, right? A couple of them. And I'm like, oh, I wore 2 of them on my arm. I was so chilled. The guys come in like, I'm like, ooh, I was mad. Ooh, I got phone wet. I went swimming with it. But anyway, it just kept going. And I'm like, Jesus. Anyway, that's the place we're back into. So even
but that's the problem, right? Like you look at that. I was talking to Aaron Bond the other day out in Toronto there. And he's worried, which rightfully so, I guess, about those big companies like Reliance and all that sort of stuff. Those are the guys that type of mentality is what builds those houses, right? And sure, they go in and build it and charge them $1 million for the mechanical or whatever the case may be, but then it's so poorly installed,
Yes, and
and
it
not maintained that
dollar value. Like even some of the stuff the inspectors are passing, I don't understand it. I don't know if anybody remembers the place we were working on where the water line froze and the sewer line froze, and we're in the chamber outside, and I'm like, oh, all the services for the town for the house, they were buried 2.5 feet
underground.
I put a metal induction line inside the water main, and I clamped on. We sterilized electrician's fish tape. I shoved her in 150 feet. We induced the line. I went outside with the locator, and I'm like, and there's Rael, and I'm like, I look back, and I'm like, where are you fucking going? The water, like, it's the front of the house is here, and we're walking right up the hill, and he's walking backwards. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? He goes, it goes this way. I'm like, the water line should have been about 70 feet. It's 178 fucking feet. It curled down around.
Oh my God.
He's outside the foundation wall, and I go out, I'm giving him shit, and I'm like, would you, like, we don't have time for this. We got stuff to do. Like, there's backed up bookings. Fuck. And I'm like, and then he's like, come and check this out. I'm like, why the water main does this. There's a reason why the sewer force main is buried so shallow. It's because they cheaped out on the blasting.
Yeah.
It's a $7 million house. The guy just bought it. He's in with his wife. It's a palace. I'm like, there's leaking vents. I'm like, what the fuck? Everybody puts these flat roofs on. I'm like, when did we get stupider with house construction? We're going to hold the moisture on the roof.
Yeah.
And the last two that I've been on, the one, that 19,000 square footer, this is the shit. The designer doesn't like to see any of the exterior troughing. So what they did is they routed it all internally.
Oh my God.
No, it's in a cold zone. Then the electrical heat trace, it looks like it goes in. They pull it out of the pipe like this, Bob. They're like, well, let's see how far the heat trace goes.
Exactly right.
Freezes, does like $10 million. Then the builder's on the hook for it. Why did you heat trace? Then there's some code you're not allowed to heat trace to it. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, whoo, whoo, whoo. We get stupider as we go. Like, you should see the shit that we built. That place up in Lillooet, the one I did for that guy where he's pretty happy. Every fucking fixture. His wife's like, I don't know if I want to get a pot filler because it could leak in the wall. I'm like, what? I'm like, I look. I'm like,
how many joints you got in the wall, lady?
Every fucking fixture, Bob, is on the outside of that. Everyone. I'm like, and the one guy came in and he's like, yeah, he failed his cold zone inspection because he goes, I think he had a vent in a cold zone. And I'm like, so he comes in, he looks at what I did, and he goes, oh, there's some little favoritism with Turbo, this guy, this and that. And I'm like, well, let me see your job, because he made him take it all out on his job. And I'm like, I said, roll inside the wall. I said, there's no vertical, there's no horizontal penetration in a frost separation.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know if I'd be the guy to challenge me on some code questions, but I'm like, and this is the guy that owns the timber mart. I'm like, you sure you want to do this? Like, what failed on your job? But I'm like, because I walked through and I'm like, Rael made one mistake on that job and we corrected it. But I'm like, even the inspector as a courtesy passed it. And I'm like, and I said to the inspector as he was about to leave, I'm like, give him a little bit of shit, make him feel some fucking heat, because we got to do it right. And he was more than willing on my credential to just stamp it and let it go. And I'm like, no, go get him. I appreciate the courtesy, but I'm like, you want that interaction with the inspector. It's two sets of eyes isn't a bad thing on a job. And with a reasonable inspector, he's not that guy. The inspector out on that dope job we were doing, he made me, oh, fuck, shit. Our pump chamber, this is how fucking retarded some inspectors are. Pump chamber, 2 of them. 4 feet of piping, 2-inch threaded. You've seen them at the top of the chamber. You gotta put your vent on. There's no fucking building. We're nowhere close to it. He makes
you run it up the top?
No. He makes me upsize the venting from 2 to 3 inch for 4 feet. I'm like this. And he goes, and I'm like, he's 73. I'm like, I said to Rael, just fucking do it. But that right there, it's a dick measuring power stroke. Like, can you imagine?
That's what it is. Yeah.
Everybody's seen it. Can you imagine me as an inspector? Whoo! I'd be right, but I'd be like, whoo, you guys, you
Heaven,
sure?
heaven help us.
Yeah, ever. You're like, the plumber's got a laser. The plumbing inspector, does he have a pocket laser level? Stabila made me one. It's called the turbo level. We're doing laser line inspections. The best one at that house we were working on, I would do something like this, but a professional framing company I don't think should. I'm doing my shower layout, and it's one of those one of those Ryobel multis that's got, I think it has it's got 5 ports, I think, out of at the top of it. It's all capped, and with the selector, you can make it go. So I'm like, all right, it's pretty, I want to make sure it's dialed. So I'm like, 2 lasers, you cross beam, and I'm like putting it in, doing all the screw bits, getting her going with the water, and I'm like, and then I see past to the next stud over, and I'm like, and the laser line is like this, and the wood looks like this, and I'm like I look at it because I can see the full 2x4, and I'm like, and okay, so then I'm like, all right, I swing the laser around 180 behind me, and my piping's in the wall, and I'm like, I don't use the level a lot of times. I'm like, just get her done, go by pretty much, and I'm like, I didn't notice, but I'm like, my pipe is crooked, and I'm like, ooh, that looks a little, I should like. Then I get the laser out, put it on my pipe. I'm good. So what they did, walls, they did, you go 16 with the little X mark. Well, the guy on that did over here, and the guy on this side did over here. So all the 2x4s on the 2 walls, they framed them all wrong.
They got them on off. They missed it by 3 inches on each side.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So then I'm like, so I go home to my buddy JR, and he's drywalling the place, and I'm killing myself laughing with this shit, because I'm like, I didn't even think about it. And then he goes, fuck. I'm like, what? He's like, for us, he goes, I've been drywall. He's been drywalling for 30 years. He gets out, wah, 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 wah. You know how those guys go. You're like, what the fuck did he just do there? And you're like, he put 16 screws in that sheet of, what?
Yeah.
That's JR. So if it's off 3 inches, he's missing with all of them. Like, I think he might get the middle.
He'll get 1 or 2. He'll get the plate. He'll get the header and the plate. Yeah. Ding, ding. Everything else in between is nothing.
He said he's good if he knows, because he goes, what they do is they mark all the floors when they do it, so that as they're going up, they're compensating the 3 inches. And I'm like, I don't know what's more terrifying, the fact that there's like, that they can still do it and they're good with it, or the fact that it gets left like that from a company that we would think, trained guys, certified, red sealed.
How's that pass framing inspection?
Fuck. And then I got the guy, Turbo, I can't quite see the CSA on that fixture. Are you sure? I bought it from Rona. Like, fucking, can you buy anything? It's not like they imported it from fucking China themselves.
I made it myself, man. I made that toilet in my barn.
And you always hear these, oh, they brought back a sink from Mexico and it broke and they got no insurance. I'm like, hey, woo. Your machine going. Wouldn't be fun if we were all the same and everything worked out. We got to be spicy. We got to be all individuals. I'm like, God.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
it's 100% true.
In business,
so
I'm like,
when are you making the trip out, Robbie?
So here's the thing, I'm like, I got to call my dad today. It's my Sunday. I've been working, like, I've actually had to work. Like, some hard shit. Like, I get home, I'm like, I painted my fence yesterday. I'm like, I'm a cheap ass, right? Because I'm broke. I bought $10 of paint from a Rebuild It center. And I'm like, I asked the lady if they had black paint. And she goes, okay, well, take it to the paint shop. And I'm like, okay, can you tint this paint black? The guy's like, we start talking. He starts mixing the thing up. And I'm like, all right, what's the thing of paint cost to tint? How do I know? Does all the buttons, they inject it with the deal, away we go. He gives me the can of paint back. I get my wallet. He goes, don't worry about it. I'm like, so I don't know what I needed. I bought a paint sprayer because I couldn't find mine. This is so good, life. Can't find my air compressor. I own this big, rigid, it's heavy. I'm like, said to Rail, I'm like, how do we lose an air compressor? It's fucking huge, and it weighs so much. It's a memorable experience when you move it, because you could separate it. They're little bitchy clasps, and I'm like, you take it apart. Well, clearly, we either left that somewhere. We needed it somewhere. I'm like, it's been busy. So, painted my fence. Today's my day of rest. I got to call my dad and be like, when somebody dies, like, how long is the thing? I guess here's why it's not a big deal, but here's why it's, I guess, different for where we are right now. She was 93. She had no friends left. Anybody that she known other than the care workers that are around her, they're all dead, right? Her friends, there's nobody to come to a funeral anymore. Because I'm fucking freaked out because I'm like, this is some weird shit. My grandma's gone. I'm like, there's a hole in my heart. I'm like, well, what about everybody else? My dad's like, everybody who? Only family. And my family's like everybody's family. Yeah. Nothing. And then, so I don't know. So it's pretty busy. So I was looking at probably in June because I'm like, I said to my aunts, I'm like, well, whether you guys do anything or not, I need to come put my hand on the little where she is. Yeah. And if I bring a pry bar, maybe I'm going to get one of those necklace things and I'll just do little
steal some matches.
Yeah. You have to get, we'll see. Little grinder action. I'll probably make something, but probably be in a couple of weeks, I'm thinking, because I'm like super busy. There's some crazy jobs I want to stay on till they're done.
Yeah.
Like this kilometer-long water line that no one's heard of that goes through a few districts. You want to watch this shit and go through because you're like, I can't wait till I tell somebody tomorrow. Best part of this is everybody in our town bitches about not having enough water. The 1-inch water line open.
Just running.
I don't know how much of a flow he's got going on, but I can only build out of a 90-pound supply. I can only build 20 psi.
Holy crap!
I know. So this guy back in the day, he had a freeze bleed line installed. So we're gonna find it probably under the river. There's a T somewhere that's just hemorrhaging water into the creek, chlorinated. Yeah. We're gonna shut that off, and the trailer park's gonna freeze. And then all the people are gonna get good water pressure in the trailer park because he's redirecting how much water to, like, I calculated on the low side, 16 gallons a minute. You do the extrapolation math. I'm like, for the time frame, I'm like, that's almost 1 billion liters of water treated.
It's a lot of freaking water. Yeah. Holy moly.
And the townspeople, and I'm like, I called the director of utilities here, and I'm like, you guys should fucking be kissing my ass right now. Anybody else followed it through? Anybody else following this? I'm like, and for problem clients like this, come and shut a valve off, put your ear on it. Well, you can hear it flowing. It's racing. Yeah, it's challenging. But anyway, I'll get through all this bullshit, and then I'll come for a drive. If I can swing it and get a new $90,000 truck, I can't afford a hotel. But
no, man, you'll fucking hit a deer.
Probably. Oh, yeah. Or a caribou, something bigger.
Yeah.
Wow. Like, say, 84,000. I'm like, when you see 96 months for a loan payment, you're like,
yeah.
And that's and you're going to see in our time frame, Bob. It's like fuel. Remember when it went over $1 a liter? Everybody's losing their shit. Gas stations are like, the signage. We're going to get. We don't know if do we want to expand it? Everybody went bigger signs. Now we're over $2. We're almost $3. Getting there. Jesus, man.
So Alberta. The only good thing I can say about our government is they axed their provincial sales tax on. So we are at 176, I think I filled up yesterday.
You guys, it's like us paying for water.
Yeah. Right? That's it. Like
Alberta.
Alberta is like the 3rd largest oil reservoir in the world.
You would think our own citizens, we'd be like, fuck you, the rest of the world. Instead, our government's like, constrict those evil do-gooders. Those ones that are paying the entire fucking country. Alberta gets shit on, and they're like,
it's insane.
And I'm like, I don't know who pen strokes the money, but I'd be cutting that cable and being like, you know what? I don't know if these idiots next door in BC are going to come with us. We're done with this shit. They got enough water. We got enough power. Get her done.
I'm not. You know what? If we wanted to become the Dubai of North America, BC and Alberta could tell the entire world to F off.
Yes, we could.
And be perfectly fine.
Then I would do this. Hey, Quebec, fuck you too. No more transfer payments. You pen stroke all this Quebecois bullshit you want. Guess who's paying for it?
You guys can send us. If you guys want oil, send us some cheese or something. That's right. That's how this is gonna go.
You see how Ukraine's kissing Putin's ass because he's got all the grain, the oil, all the energy. And let's
I do think on some level, that Trudeau understands that on some level, because if he opened up the floodgates, and said, do whatever the hell you want, like you said, you've got you got water and trees and whatever that, mining up the ass.
We don't have to go
We
anywhere.
got oil and freaking grain and cows up our asses. Like,
All I'll say is this: you can reproduce this anytime you want it. We're not getting rid of gasoline engines, guys.
you're
You can.
not. You're absolutely not.
You may think that you are, and it sure is. Once you do the conversions and you start looking at it, and you're like, do you know how much energy it costs to produce an electric vehicle? Now, if we push all the technology towards that, there needs to be, like everything, balance. That's it. But you got to
Well,
make
like I said,
make
so
it money. You want to make an electric car work? Offer a subsidy or make fuel so fucking expensive that electric car sales going through the roof. And for Karen watching, you know what? That works. Hi, Karen. Yeah, my daughter wants to get a Tesla. I'm like, so let me get this straight. You can't afford a car that I bought you, by the way. You can't afford your own car that I gave you, but you're gonna fucking put $50K down on a Tesla?
the whole world, Robbie,
Where's
the
that?
entire world is all about virtue signaling. That's all it is.
How do I look?
Yep.
And then CBC with the whole trucker convoy behind me. CBC dudes, I was watching the guys in the videos. They're like, "What are you guys doing? There's an empty field back there. The truckers convoy is here." And they're like, "CBC's looking this way." And I'm like, Rebel News was one that I was watching a bit, and the guy would pan like this, and I'm like, CBC guys are making it look like a barren waste country. The drone shot is 8 square city blocks. I'm like, that's a lot of pissed off people.
Yep.
We've got a disconnect between the government and reality. And that's just, it's out
and
of
I
control.
do think for a vast majority of people, and I do mean people, Americans, Canadians, Europeans, that gap is starting to narrow because those guys have been lying their faces off for so long that they can't hide them anymore.
Look at what they do in a third world country. Oh, World of Carpentry's on. He's like, hey, what's going on, guys? I'm like, there's a lot of shit going on. Here's what's going on.
A lot of shit going down, man.
I was in Peru with my daughter 2 years ago before this massive fucking pandemic. I mean, the body piles were so big. It was so big. People everywhere. So scared. At one point, a year in, I'm like, I don't know anybody that had it. Anybody?
Not me.
All I know had anyone got COVID. And I was like, and then stupid shit people were saying, I'm like, this is insanity. When I went to Peru with my daughter, I was looking at these. You see how the people live in Lima? Shanty shitholes where I'm like, ooh, like, I like to go to the nasty spots because I want to see reality. And I'm like, these people living in those, it looked like a fucking movie that you've seen with like Leonardo DiCaprio, where little shanty huts. And I'm like, open cesspools in the street, shit like that. And I'm like, wow. And then you see where the El Presidente lives. And I'm like, look at this the guard comes out now, do the little fucking twirly moves. I'm like, must have been 400 people. And I'm like, and all I could think of is, and it was every day. I'm like, who the fuck pays for this? And then I was yapping to one of the locals, and they're like, they've assassinated the last 4 presidents for corruption.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you look at this, you push people to the brink of where the bankruptcies, like the interest rate, that you know what it is? Canada. The world is getting whipped into debt, a debt of servitude. That's what's coming.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is what they want, really.
Yeah. Doesn't make sense. Like none of it. But I want to retreat further into the forest. I'm like, I've looked at a couple properties. I was out your way looking. I'm like, still on that same program. I'd have got a dog if I'd known fucking COVID was going to go on 3 years. And then some monkey bullshit comes out because we're going to be handcuffed to that, and I'll be gagged, right? Better get this.
It's coming. The camps are coming, Robbie.
Oh,
the camps are coming,
buddy.
I don't know. I disagree with that. I don't think they're coming. I don't think they have the ability to enforce it. They can say whatever the hell they want. But like you said, the last 4 in Lima have been. If it comes down to enforcement, there's not a fucking chance.
You push the people too hard. That the Romans used to watch men rip each other apart and kill them for sport.
Yeah.
The Indians want to expand their nation. What do? They go kill everybody in the next tribe over. People are like, it's so horrible. I'm like, humans love killing each other. And when it goes to a level where, you know, remember that mob going by that rich guy with a gun?
Yeah.
Well, Buddy's only got a 30-round clip on that. He's smart enough to have two of them welded together. And maybe, you know, with his polo shirt on, he might have another 60-rounder. You make him squeeze off those 120 rounds, and if he can accurately hit anything, 40 people, he's maybe going to kill a few. They're going to come and kill you.
Yep.
Rocket launcher, Bob. Rocket launcher. You don't even have to be that close with those.
No, that's the beauty of where you live and where I live is the chances of that. Like nobody's coming because nobody knows where I live.
When they say this stuff, you know, the Chinese are landing in Kitimat, all this bullshit I've read. I'm like, do you know where I fucking live? Do you watch when I work? I drive, and I'm like, I drive. I take a shotgun with me. Why? Have you seen? I pull over to take a leak, and I'm like, I'm getting firewood. I get heebie-jeebied. I shut the fucking saw off. I get in the truck and drive away. Whatever's on the ground, I leave.
Yeah.
I either feel. The last time I was out, I cut around. I left it there. Because I'm like, I just loaded, I'm cutting, and then the hair on the back of my neck stands up. I get a little feeling, and I'm like, I'm done. And I'm going into the forest, and I've done it where I'm like, I don't feel anything. I do the whole thing there for a couple hours. Yeah. I'm like, I've learned that when it knocks, you listen. So I live in the bush. Like, I mean, fucking, you're coming here for what?
Right. For what?
In paradise, and the pissed off animals, and maybe me if you're lucky. So.
Yeah.
You know, the Chinese are coming. Come on. I go down to cities, and I'm like, it's getting so busy up here. I got to get a pass to go for a walk in the forest. There's a trail up north called Joffrey Lake. It's beautiful. Somebody put it in some social magazine, some log that's out. People got to go take a selfie off the fucking thing.
Yeah.
Park down the highway, people getting hurt. I'm like, it's a circus. And I'm like, you know, we live in 100 square kilometers in this valley. It is fucking massive. I said on the forum site, we live in Loggers Lane. There's Loggers street names. Cut the fucking trees down and put a parking lot in. Oh my God! You're not an environmental prick. I'm like, I'm using vegetable oil in my eco-friendly hand crank saw that I found it with hand and coal. It's not eco, but it's as close as I could get. And then fucking freaking out. And I'm like, I can't even go for a walk in that trail anymore.
Yeah.
Right? You got to register. And I'm like, when I pulled on the highway there and backed those people out coming down that one time where I'm like, how the fuck I coming down the hill and I don't normally stop. I normally stop for this shit. I had a full load of wood on, and I'm like, oh, my truck wasn't happy with the brakes there. Because I'm like, I look and this guy's in. I'm like, you can tell they've been digging for hours. Poor bastard. So anyway, I hooked up to him, and I'm like, right there at that beautiful spot. And I think 1 million people went last year. And I'm like, it'll be wrecked. Wow. They got a guy to build a trail so that you could take someone that shouldn't be on it. You could take them on it. It used to be a hike trail. It used to be boulders. It was pretty, like, it wasn't an easy trail. This guy, they paid him a shit ton of money, this local guy, to make it like
accessible.
What could go wrong there? And then now it's overrun. I don't enjoy this area anymore because of the volume of people. And I'm like, I need to go into the bush more.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that guy pissed off. I'm like, I moved here from a town. I want to live in about what I grew up in. And this isn't it anymore. It's evolved around me. And I'm like, okay, I'll whack down a few trees, clean up the property, and then I'm out.
See you later. Yeah. It's true.
You know, you can live on your property and fuck around there for the rest of your life. Tinker around. You know, as you evolve the barn, you like, you know, keep the tools for the kids maybe, but get that out of there. Next thing you know, Bob's joinery and edged weapons. You know, you have some thing to get into. Who knows? But you can do whatever you want.
It's true.
We'll fly around your train box. You'll come out of one side of the stage. I'll come out of the other side. We'll be like the Muppets. We'll be like, it's the Bob and Rob show.
Bob and Rob show.
Taco Pumps will be like
300. Number 300.
For our show afterwards. They've started a cranky kit now. They don't plumb anymore.
That's right.
They will be in our 70s. We got to get that roll down. Kids won't know what the Muppets are by then, but at least we will.
No. Whatever the social media platform is on that by that time, we'll have to be like on every day bitching about. We'll just be bitching about everything.
I wonder if we'll be woke by then.
No.
Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna get woke. I don't think so. I was looking at the woke stuff. I'm like, nah, I don't think.
I had my moment to become woke, and then said, no, that's insane. I'm out.
Well, you push those two buttons like the Matrix, the red and the blue pill. I feel like I made a choice and I went with it. And I'm like, I don't think the woke things happen.
No.
No. And the pronouns.
Unless I mean, all those guys have gone absolutely insane. It's like as everything can, you can go too far left and you can go too far right. And we've seen.
Yeah, let's keep it. We got those concrete.
You got to keep it. What's the saying? You got to keep it between the fucking white lines, man.
Keep it between the lines. I said that to Toolaholic and those guys, right? When all these guys were yapping. And I'm like, this was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And I'm like, you know what, guys? From what I've checked into, you guys don't even, the only ticket you have for anything is a fucking driver's license, maybe a forklift ticket. I told Tool Pig we had a good go, man. I went on him for probably a year. And
He's still around? I don't even know if he's around anymore.
I'm not sure. I haven't seen him post too much. He's still, I saw some of his stuff. But he was like, and I sat down with him one day and we had a great conversation at AHR in Vegas. And I'm like, just stay in your fucking lane. When you cross over and you say something wrong that I know is wrong, and you're doing it for some flash, like Travis Collins breaking his hand, you know what? Okay, it's kind of funny. He wants to be sort of a jackass guy, sort of the tool guy. I'm like, I don't really get where he's at in his life, but that's his shit and that's fine. But apparently, guys in the States don't get trained that well. Okay?
Apparently. It's obviously.
Because if you have guys like us, I'm 50 years old. I'm going to travel around and give my brain away for free. Are you fucking stupid?
Well, there's that, and I'm not throwing any shade his way. It's that freaking alpha elite guy.
What?
And he's traveling the whole world and every state, and he's setting up. I think, again, I'm speaking out of turn, but he's like setting up his own plumbing school. I'm like, how the hell did that happen?
I don't know. Like, that's the thing. I don't know how you do this. I'm like, and I think, and here's what I'll say it in again. Here's what I say it is, and again, in the States. The States, I think, does a lot of not shitty training, but some states, you don't even have to have certification. So I'm a plumber in the state of whatever. Yeah. I've heard me going off on John. They're like, but you don't have to have that. You have a contractor's license. I'm like, well, what the fuck is that? Well, that's just a rubber stamp on a piece of paper. I'm like, do you have technical qualification? I had to go to school for 4 years, put in my time, do an equivalency, all the bullshit. I'm like, yeah? No. Some do, right? I think Eric's got his master's license. So
Eric does, and the crazy part is like places like New Jersey where George is at, George the plumber.
Yep.
Like they don't they accept no one unless you've done New Jersey school.
I was gonna say there's some guys can't take
so his license is worth like millions of bucks.
And then in Nevada, fuck it.
Yeah.
You got wait a minute.
I could drive down to Nevada and get a plumbing license tomorrow.
Costco card, good enough. You can you can do the high rise. And how insurance?
Right?
I'd have 10 million liability insurance so that I can boiler contracting. Because they're like, you can kill one person. And I'm like, not willfully. I read it wrong. Got excited. I can kill one person, they said, with my insurance today. A claim where it comes against me. And I'm like, he goes, 10 million. And I'm like, and that's probably changed since then. Right? And try to get today. Rael's going to start his own company. He's like, I don't think I can. Can't get insurance. There's one insurance underwriter for the country. One plumbing insurance underwriter. Don't piss those guys off, Bob. Just going to fucking say. Can handle it. Yeah.
It's true. It is true.
Wells, Nevada, don't need a permit or a license. Okay, we got.
So whatever is not Marlon, the plumber.
Yeah.
Like he got his ticket in Cali, and then moved to Chicago, and was a first-year plumber. Had to start over.
Oh my
like
God.
that's how screwed up the states are, right? Like no matter where you go, it's wide open.
The guys call themselves plumber, and I'm watching, and I'm like, as I'm fucking sizing out an entire trailer park and doing volume calculations, and I'm like, I'm having a lot of fun, by the way. I got my code book out, doing cross-reference charts. If I go oop north, can I go 10 feet a second? I'm talking myself into changing pipe size. Then I think about some guys like in the state of Nevada where you don't have to do this shit. What do they guess? The engineer takes the responsibility. The engineers, how many times have you done an engineered print? You size it, you check it, and it's wrong. You're like, I can't put that in.
All the time.
I said that to the welding guy. He's like, they were going to sue me. They're like, you fucked up. And I'm like, How did I fuck up? Well, this isn't the same that's on the print. And I'm like, well, it didn't pass code. And they were going to sue me. They said, you got to put it in like on the print. I'm like, I can't put it in the print. The jingle I had with the inspector was, tell you what, your picture sucks. We could circumvent the whole side. Me and Rael, I completely redesigned all his shit. Didn't even look close. And I'm like, we're going to do it this way. We saved a shit ton of fittings and they wanted some money back. And I'm like, no, what? You paid inspection. Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah. Some of the shit that comes out of people's mouths, I'm like, what? Oh yeah. Let me, where's my wallet?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, we literally had the same thing. They cited the gas line as 1 inch, and you needed 2 inch. And so I changed it on site, right? Installed it all. The inspector comes and passes it. The engineer comes and blows a gasket.
Freaks out.
Like, that's the wrong fucking side, man. It's 1 inch on the plan. I'm like, dude, it's a chart. Read the chart.
I know.
How many BTUs do you have in this thing? You created the total BTUs on this kitchen line. Read it. Oh, yeah. Sorry about that.
I asked the guy that's yelling at me, and I'm like, I do two things to shut this down almost immediately. I'm like, we'll call him Charlie. Charlie, does your code book say something? Does it read different than mine? Because here it is. One, and then I'm like, now second, you just need, I'll put it back. I'll take it all out right now and put it in 1 inch. But I need you to sign this piece of paper saying that you're accepting the responsibility for it not passing and being wrong. And then the smart ass guy, and he's like, you're a fuck. You're right. And I'm like, sorry, one more time. I'm that guy too, right? One more time.
Yeah. Say it again.
I've made guys apologize to me in front of people. I'm like, you want me to come back and do this? You're going to say you're sorry. Fuck you, I am. I'm like,
all right, find someone else.
I'm in a golf tournament with your boss tomorrow. What do you want to bet? I'll pull my fucking contract numbers and tell you to shove it up your ass. And then what do you want to bet? You're going to come and say you're sorry tomorrow. You know what? Tough guy routine accepted. And I'm like, see you tomorrow, champ.
Yeah.
Oh, look. Yeah. Hey, how you doing? Sorry, one more. What? Fucking people. No kidding. I don't have a problem calling people out. Exactly. Look at, someone fucks up. If I make a mistake, if it's me, it's free. Own it. Own your shit. Be a mouthpiece, but you better walk on water. If you're going to, I'm dancing on the fence post saying fuck you to the other guys and they all got their pea shooters shooting at me. I'm going to fall off the fence eventually. Don't throw a water heater over your shoulder. You're going to break down. I'm like, I'm picking up speed, guys. I'm like, I can put a guy half my age to shame physically working with him. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I wish I had 10 of me. Like, my God, I would own the corridor. Oh, the money.
There's a lot of money out there. There's so much money. It's insane.
And then you get some guy that wants a deal on a faucet for $200. I'm like, I don't even want that guy to find my phone number. Nope. Just call me up. Sorry, did you say $26,000 for that boiler install?
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah.
Or I got something weird. I'm like, oh, even better. I'm going to make money for something weird. I'm like, I love that even better. Or something that nobody else will do. Yeah, we called around and you'll do this work, right? And I'm like, yeah, it's going to be expensive. Yeah, like what we're doing is illegal. And I love when people are like, oh, it's illegal. And I'm like, for fuck, man, the CIA is not sitting around the corner like spooks in a fucking band. Turbo's putting in one side seat wall. You're like, wait, guys, make it sound. I'm getting fucking put the chains on it. Here we go in cuffs. And we're like, take me away. I'm like, guys, what can you do? But I'm like, the inspectors are ran a little thin anyway. Doesn't mean you can get away with some shit. But I'm like, we do lots of uninspected work. But I tell the same thing to the same people that I do the work for. If the inspector taps me on the shoulder, it passes. Yeah. What we're doing is circumventing some of the time frames. Can't cover it until we inspect it. You know what? Test is passed, pull the plug. Right? So. Yeah.
It's true. Georgie's on here. It's interesting. I've been doing it long enough that we've had people that hired me, then said I was too expensive, and then hired someone else, and then we come back and have to fix all their shit. Yep. And then, 5 years later, the conversation comes up again. They're like, dude, you're too expensive. I'm like, I know. Then hire Stevie back then. Get Stevie back in here. Remember that? Like, do it. Oh, yeah, right.
Laura does the control stuff. the Edmonton fan. Laura does control stuff for the business.
Hey, Laura, if she's on here,
Yep.
screw Edmonton. Screw Edmonton.
Yeah, well,
Fucking Oilers.
the whole hockey situation. I'm like, here's the problem with that. Is somebody going to be salty? It's a perfect divorce. Somebody's pissed off either way.
Right?
You know, Edmonton went ahead. I'm like, well, okay, well, who are they going to come up against? I'm like, I don't know. They're going to get slapped around the next round, so we'll see if Jesus takes them there. So we'll see.
We'll see.
And I've shown Laura this the last couple of days, literally the last couple of weeks. I'm like, you're not going to believe who I'm going to do a service call for. Who? I'm like, this person. I literally told them to go fuck themselves.
Sorry, Laura. Sorry. She's calling me rude.
It comes down to, all right, you know what I've done to a couple of clients, and Laura's been witness to this in the last little bit. I'm like, we're now like lawyers. Fuck it. Send me $5,000 as a retainer up front. When that runs out, I'll give you a call. If you don't accept it, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
You ever write the go fuck yourself email? I do. Laura's like, oh. I'm like, you guys are fucking assholes. I'm so pissed off. You know what? Begging for my money. Hate it. I don't. Yeah. I should do an ugly enough job or a good enough job for you. You fucking have your pen out, right? Rose petals. I want to go when I'm done. I want to have a shower and get the fuck out of your house and go home.
Yeah.
And get paid.
It's true.
Not paying. The disrespect for not payment is. I'm like, oh man. Yeah, that kind of gets me. So she's witnessed it in the last couple of things where people have literally had to give me money before I even started. And I've done it over the years. And I'm like, we're in a small area. We're in a fishbowl. You think you got balls. I'm like, I work 7 fucking days a week. Much as I want. I half of the work.
Yep.
So
it's true.
Yeah. Anyway, my battery's going to die. This thing blipped out. How long have we been on? Like 3 hours?
No, we're like 2.5, man. 2.5.
Jesus. What did we talk about?
Did you miss?
I just woke up. Woo!
Laura, if you emailed me a jersey, I'll stick it up in the barn here. That's what she said. She emailed me a jersey. Oh,
a Gretzky jersey?
Fine.
Okay, look it. I was even surprised by this because I own 32 jerseys. I don't have an Edmonton jersey. I don't even have a Calgary jersey. And there's a couple players that I would own.
You have 32? Dude, there's only 33 teams. So
no. Not different. I got some multiples and stuff like that.
Okay.
All that shit. Like I've got some like classics that I'm like, you know, people are like, oh, I hate the Montreal Canadiens. I'm like, yeah, but a Richard jersey? Gordie Howe? Like, come on, I get it. But I'm like, some of the icons, I'm like, right? You know, Gretzky. Why don't I own a Gretzky jersey? He was arguably one of the best players in history. And I'm like, for sure.
Yeah. 100%.
Like some of the players you could list off and like some awesome ones where you're like, you know, not too many people have a Semenko jersey. Right? But
not very many people know who Semenko is. Unless if you're in Western Canada, then you know who Semenko is.
Yeah. Good God. Some courses over the years anyway to watch hockey. Pretty neat.
So
anyway, I can't believe it. 2.5 hours. Whew.
2.5? Yeah.
Pretty good.
Good job.
Okay.
Cranky old fuckers.
The barn. And a couple people have said to me, we're going to have a deadlift competition. But to be fair, if we're doing volumetrics on weight, I'm a skinny motherfucker now, okay? So everybody just needs to lighten up a little bit. Right?
You heard it here first. You heard the first excuse here first, right now.
I'll still be able to lift it. I'm just saying I'm down 75 pounds. Like, my bony ass, I'm like, luckily in my gym, I can still do everything I did, and I still scare people at work, so I'm good.
You've seen all those guys that lift that heavy weight and then pass out. We'll make sure we'll have a mat behind you. So you can be like, oh.
I think at one point we were deadlifting, I think it was 450 pounds, and I had straps on my arms because I couldn't hold the bar.
Yeah.
And my weightlifting buddy, I'm like, he's like, bring your straps tomorrow. I'm like,
okay.
What strap? I'll let mine, I'll show you. And I'm like, this guy was a little nuts. He had this massive chain that he wore, like chain for towing trucks out. And he's doing his pull-ups. He'd add 2 45-pound plates, like hanging like testicles, and he'd be there. I'm like, dude, I don't want to hurt myself. I don't mind working out. But I'm like, you're fucking insane. That's me saying that.
Right?
I'm not saying I'm not going to try. Because when we would lift the weight up, the bar would curl, and I'm like, and we would do these shoulder shrugs, and I'm like, I could feel my spinal column compressing, and I'm like,
You got
it was the heaviest thing I ever lifted, 450 pounds. I'm like, and I
you
could
got to
get
be
it.
able to.
Oh,
You got to be able to go to work tomorrow, man. That's how that works.
and that's like me flipping over water heaters, stuff like that. I have no issue with that. I got a good way to carry them. I'm like, done it for years. Not a worry at all. Crazy shit.
No,
Anyway,
the things you do.
stayed through the whole thing. I'm gonna go paint a fence or something, or a bike, or God knows, rebuild that. You know that I ordered all the switchgear for that stupid log splitting thing, eh?
Oh
I
yeah,
tested the motor. I'm like, no shit.
it works.
It works. It's gonna work. Yep. I got
Awesome.
continuity windings to ground. I'm like, I got 3 checks I did. I'm like, 1, 2, 3. I'm like, I'll order up the switchgear. This thing, I'm like, I don't know. There's gonna be some funny shit. I'm like, I can't tell how many ton the piston is, right? I'm like, some of the shit I'm picking up, I'm like, get the antique machine going. I'm like, 1955. Your dad probably would have made something like this. He'd be like, let Bob run it.
I guarantee you.
Oh, yeah.
That's what you did back then. Is you pieced it all together. Frankenstein something together.
Oh, yeah. Your dad saw an I-beam on a job, and he's like, grab that. We're going to make a log splitter out of it. And you're like, like, I don't even know what he made, but he made it. It's done.
Yeah.
Doesn't look dangerous at all. Too funny.
No, that'll be awesome. I'll look forward to seeing that go.
I can't wait. Well, Amazon, that stuff will be here probably Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm going to be like a child outside for Christmas, and I'll be like, because I was going to this is how janky I was going to do it. I was going to run my power cord from my dryer outside, no problem. I was going to bare end, put the wires in, hardwire the motor, and then use the breaker to turn it on. So I have to be inside the house, flip it, see if the thing turns, could start on fire because it's just pushed in. Because I'm like, do you want to take the time to take Moret and all the shit? I'm like, on a 30 amp draw motor?
No. Set up. Make sure you set up your camera outside so we can see it light on fire.
Exactly. You saw the table saw where I tapped it with a wrench and the thing shooting sparks out. I'm like, this has got to be the same thing.
Yeah.
And him in the house, I'll be like, and so I ordered all the shit so I can, if it's going to blow up, I'm going to be standing on it. Like literally flip the switch and it's right in front of me. Like that video I shared. So I'm going to put a shield on and sunglasses. Probably work like better than a store-bought. That's the other thing. The equivalent to purchase that is $2,700.
Yeah.
Price for what it is. And I'm like, it's 240 electric. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to ever split wood in the forest. So because you can tow it behind your car, I can't imagine why you ever would. Like it's where are you going to put it? And fire up a generator? I failed to see the point in that. Yeah.
When you get the heebie-jeebies out there in the middle of the forest, you're not going to be able to load that up fast enough.
Exactly. Right. And it's like, then split it and put it in the truck all split. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I mean, the most I've ever had was 9 rounds in the truck where I'm like, I'm scared to put any more in because it's that heavy. That's a lot of wood. As my tire falls off, and I'm like, God, why? I'm like, you should see it when I've overloaded it. And I'm like, it'll be fine. And then I'm like, like driving a yogurt container down the highway. I'm like, this thing sure is greasy. And I'm like, oh yeah, the tires are pancaked. I'm like, these are E-rated tires. You're like, why are the brakes shot? I'm like, 18% grade with a full load of firewood in gear 2. I'm like, right?
Yeah. It's like sanding. You've seen where they like melted stuff on a fucking belt sander. That's your brakes.
Exactly. And then it's like, I'm sure saving money next year on my heating bill.
Yeah, exactly.
You
saved a total of $1,800 on your fuel bill, but you spent like $600 on your fucking car.
As I chastise my daughter for buying an electric car. The only thing I'll say beyond it is this: 2 things with it. 1, I enjoy the time outdoors. I do. I enjoy the whole process of the firewood. I don't know if I'm saving money, but I enjoy what you get out of it. I enjoy the quality, the heat, and the fact that I can do it myself. Right? I go out, I chop something down in the forest, I splinter it all up. It's a lot of work when I'm here, when I'm available, but I enjoy the process behind it. So that's why. Okay. Well, I can't even see the red anymore. I know I'm old, but my thing is down to near nothing. It's just going to cut off on me. I like the fact that we don't get clipped anymore for our time frame, because we used to get shut down at an hour and we'd be like,
an hour. Yeah.
And gone. Positive change on the internet. we'll
A
be
lot has changed.
we'll be both booted off on here. I think we both said the word assassination and terrorist, and I think
I said Nazi a couple of times. That's gonna get me. That's gonna get me.
bomb looks like drain mob, but if you read it backwards, it's bomb.
Oh, yeah.
That. And,
Bomb.
mob.
Yeah. Mob. All the bad words.
Next decade. Turbo who? Anyway, peace out, everybody. Good chat, Bob.
All right.
Next one, I'll
Be
be doing
good.
next. Okay, peace, everybody. Bye.
Bye. That's it. Turbo's out. I'm out. The Bob and Rob Show 3.0 went fantastic. 2.5 hours of just absolute yes. Exactly as promised. Got some exciting guests in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's it for now. Have a fabulous Sabbath. Be well. Look after yourselves, your families. Look after whatever's important in your life. Out.